Yum, yum.
Greg here. Quick note. I know this is super long. It's the longest video ever made times 3. But 3 things. 1, no mid-roll ads, so you can scrub around all you want. No annoying ads will come up. Those suck. I never do them anyway. 2, there's clearly chapters along the bottom and in the description, so you can scrub to your chapter. 3, there's on-screen like lower thirds telling you where you're at, so you can definitely scrub around and have an idea of what you're looking at any time. I had to make this long for it to be useful to Maxon developers because they need explicit examples and demonstrations of where, what I'm talking about, not just make Bevel tool better, it sucks. That's not useful to anybody. If you're a user, please do come to the Pixel Fondue Discord and talk to us. Tell me where I'm wrong and I screwed up. If you're in the comments, that's fine. And also tell me where you agree with me, where I've been at, I've been asking for this for 3 years and they haven't implemented it yet. Please, get on them about this. And so we can make this useful. I'll also release these videos individually. The modeling one's section's like an hour, but the selection one's probably 20 minutes or something. So there's shorter videos as well, but I'll put this main big one out first. And yeah, again, sorry it's super long, but here's the video. Greg here from Pixel Fondue. This video is all about making Cinema4D a great modeling program. And yes, you heard me right. I think it could be made into a great modeling program, but there's a lot that needs to be done. And more importantly, it needs to be made into a great modeling program without ruining it, because it's not really used as modeling. It's really considered to be sort of an adequate modeling program or an animation program with some modeling tools. Moving over to Cinema4D for Modo, and I love a lot about Cinema4D, but the modeling tools and UVing in particular as well leave quite a bit to be desired. And the weird thing is it has like 85% of what it needs, but it doesn't have the right workflow, and there's a lot that needs to be changed and tweaked and adjusted, and a few things that need to be added to really elevate this program into a great modeling program. And that needs to be done without ruining what Cinema4D is good at, which is animation. So have to be very careful with things like keyboard shortcuts and how some various things work to not ruin what it's good at and elevate the modeling tools. So that's what this video is. It's a deep dive into the display and the selection system and the modeling tools and workflow and the customization abilities or lack thereof that need to be elevated to really make Cinema4D a great modeling program. I'm going to kind of go through all of these things. I'm going to demonstrate how Modo solved these problems to make it a great modeling program. Now, one of the things Modo did is it started off just as a modeling program before it added rendering and animation and rigging and all of that. It's excuse for dynamics. But it's very good at modeling. And some of the best modelers in the world used Modo, and there was a good feedback loop between the developers and the modelers and gaming and visual effects to create a fantastic polygon and sub-D modeling system. Modo's a dead program now. It's never going to change. Foundry won't give it up, and it's just in a sort of dead state. It's existing. You can download it and you can use it, but it's never going to change. There's no reason to let all of these great modeling tools and workflows die with Modo just because Foundry doesn't know how to market anything. Cinema4D can absolutely pick up a lot of these tools and workflows and systems, integrate them into Cinema4D without ruining what it's already good at and make it a better system. So when I'm talking about a good modeling program, what makes a good modeling program, I'm talking about a program that lets you enter as an artist a flow state. I'll just call it a flow state. We are totally focused on the model you're making in the middle of the screen, and you're just putting the shapes in your head onto the screen, and the interface around the program just sort of goes into the background. And that's accomplished in Modo by making all of the sort of little repetitive things part of your muscle memory as an artist. So when you're flipping off wireframes or turning off the grid or doing some selection operation, it's just muscle memory. You don't have to think about it. It doesn't pull you out of that flow state and back into the interface of the program. In Cinema4D, there are so many things that just pull you out of the flow state. You can't ever really get into one because you're constantly having to go and dig through some menu to turn off some common operation like the grid or something that's just some checkbox somewhere, or a checkbox on a selection tool, or a keyboard shortcut combination that's on the right side of the keyboard that makes you look at your keyboard, which is a big no-no when you're trying to enter a flow state. Now, modeling is just a big process of it's a selection and an operation. It's a selection and an operation more than any other aspect of 3D. Where animation, you're adjusting curves. You're not doing a lot of using a lot of different tools with keyboard shortcuts. Again, like rigging or dynamics or texturing, lighting. It's generally working within the UI and menu items and properties, and not a lot of keyboard shortcuts. Modeling is all keyboard shortcuts, and selecting should be as well. And you're doing these constantly, and most of those should be in your left hand, so you don't have to look at the keyboard. Another thing with Cinema4D is you're constantly looking at the attribute manager down in the corners. Okay, so let's ease our way into the shallow end of this set of features we need to make Cinema4D a better modeler by talking about some display options that I think are imperative. And the first one is an artist should never be in a position where they don't know what's selected. If you're modeling and you're selecting something, you should always know what components are selected without having to go to some special mode or flip around to the back end of the model or do something like that. And Cinema4D really fumbles this, in my opinion. So let's take a look at Cinema4D here. And this model, by the way, is from Tor Frick. He was a AAA games modeler from Modo. He's moved on, but his tutorials are all free now. You can go on Gumroad to get this model, and I'll put the link in the description. I just want to attribute this to Tor. But it's a good example of like a AAA like mech model that you would use, and so I'm going to use this throughout the video. It's also cool, so why not? But let's take a look at what I'm talking about here. So let me grab the chest plate here, and I'm going to isolate it, and then I'll go to poly mode and get a marquee selection tool, right? And so first of all, I know this visibility isn't checked, this little checkbox here. I'll get to that later. We're talking about selections, but let's just select through the model, because let's say I'm trying to select through the model. And so I select through the model purposefully, but I can't tell what's grabbed on the back side. I can't see that these lines, these polygons right here are selected without having to go to the back side of the model and look, right? So I don't know what's selected unless I turn it around or go turn on some sort of special mode. And that's really problematic when you're modeling, because I'm gonna like do some operation to these or even just assign a material. I need to take the extra step to look around to see what else I'd selected, or I have to do a front selection only and then flip around and select the back ones individually. And so in other situations as well, let me just get out of this and let's select the head here and maybe select some of these guys, right? Let's select some of these little knobs here. I can't tell that these are selected if I'm on the back side of the model. Like I just don't know what's selected. I'm in a situation where I have things selected and I don't know what's selected, right? And it works on the inside of the model as well. Let's say I'm on the inside of the model here and I've selected something on the inside. And let's say I've selected this, purposefully, from, a material, polygon tag or something like that. I can't see that it's selected. Maybe I selected all the pipe, materials that are associated with pipes or tubes, but I can't see that's selected, right? I can kind of see it through some cracks here, but generally I just can't see that it's selected without going to some sort of special mode, like an X-ray mode. And so if we go back into Modo and take a look at how Modo solves this problem, with Modo, it's just super easy. If I select this guy, and again, I just go to polygon mode and I do a marquee selection, I can tell that that line of polys on the backside is selected. I can just see right through it. It's slightly, less opaque or whatever, slightly more transparent looking orange. And I can very easily deselect that if I want to without having to go over here and look around and see what I'm doing. It just shows me through the selection, and I cannot undersell how important it is to be able to do that, because I can always see what's selected on my model, right? If I have these guys selected and I'm doing something, I can always see that they're selected, right? I can go over here, I can see I've got all of them selected just by looking at it. I can deselect these from any position on the model. I can see polygons. I converted those to points. I converted these to edges. I can still see them. It just works, right? If I select something on the inside of the model, like that tube again, wherever that was over here, I can see that it's selected. If I had just selected that, the material polygons from that material just to select all the tubes to see where they are, maybe change the material. I can see that, through the model without having to go into some sort of like special mode. It's so important to be able to do that. I can deselect these without having to like guess what I just deselected, right? Or go into some special mode. It's hugely important. It's hugely important. And to quote Todd Howard, it just works. But in actuality this time, it does just work. And that is super important to be able to do that. Because the alternative in Cinema4D has just all kinds of negatives, right? So let's go back over here. Let's just go to Poly Mode and let's take a look at these guys again, right? So if I want to view them through the model, I have to come out of my flow state. I've got to like dig through some menu. I got to go look at, oh yeah, okay, fine, X-ray mode. Now I can see through it, but X-ray mode's only working on the selected piece of geometry. So it's not a selected item over here. So it's not really helping me. If I want to look at the whole thing in geometry mode or X-ray mode, I've got to select all of these. And, now I can, but who wants to work in this mode? Like, look at this, right? It's the worst of all worlds. You can't tell what's going on. It's too transparent. It's just kind of ugly. It's like, you would never want to work like this. You would want to work like this, right? And if I've got these selected, I can look right through there and see that it's selected. That's how it should work. And Cinema4D, certainly they're going to do some sort of viewport update, and they really need to include this in their update. So there's that. Keeps you in the flow state. You can always see what's selected. You can select and deselect without having to hide parts of your model or, go to some special like selection mode or anything like that. Okay, so I think I made my point there. Let's go back to something else. Okay, number 2 here, allow verts and wireframes to be shown or hidden at any time, regardless of what mode you're in. So let me explain really quickly. On this one, let me go to Cinema4D. Let's just select this piece and isolate it and go to polygon mode. Okay, you have these nice blue wireframes. Great, looks great. Normally that's fine. But there are times when you're going to be wanting to make subtle adjustments to edges and vertices, little pushes and pulls to make sure the shading, the smoothing between normals on like a low poly object is working out really well. And you can't hide the wireframe here. You're stuck with it no matter what. If I want to see what this looks like without the blue, wireframe, I've got to jump back out to, and check the sort of shading or normal interpolation. I have to jump back out to object mode and make sure wireframes are off, and then go back into polygon mode if I'm going to make another adjustment. Kind of the same thing with UV mapping, right? So if I'm in UV edit mode and I'm adjusting some UVs here, let's look at sort of a dense area like along here, right? Along this like tube right here. So if I'm trying to adjust these UVs, wherever they are on here, if I have a texture on here, it's hard to see the texture when there's these thick blue wireframes. I want to turn off the wireframes. I want to be in, sort of model mode or object mode to see my texture across the surface unimpeded by, having wireframes on there, right? And so you're just sort of stuck with them. And it goes the same thing with vertices, right? There are times when you just want to turn vertices on or off, regardless of what mode you're in. I may want to turn vertices on in polygon mode just to see if there's a vertex in the middle of this edge here, right? And same thing in edge mode or even vertex mode. Sometimes I want to turn the vertices off just to get them out of the way and just make tweaks on the mesh without seeing the actual vertice there. And there's no way to do that in Cinema4D. So here in Modo, the display of wireframe or vertices is completely independent of what mode you're in. You could always turn on wireframes or turn them off. You could always turn on vertices and turn them off. So if I'm on this piece here and I'm in, in polygon mode, I'm selecting polygons, I can turn off the verts and wireframes if I want to like tweak edges and sort of see how that affects the shading, right? And same with like, textures and UVs. If I'm doing UV mapping and I want to see the texture on here and I'm selecting polygons, I don't want to see some sort of thick wireframe on there interfering with my view of the texture. And same with like, vertices. Like there's going to be cases where, let me just subdivide these edges a little bit. You may have vertices on this edge. If I'm in edge mode and in Cinema4D, I'm never going to see those. They're not going to show up. I have to be in vertex mode to see vertices, any vertices at all. But here I can be in item mode and have vertices shown. I can also change the size of vertices and things like that. But if I'm in like edge mode, I'm selecting edges, I can always see the vertices or show or hide the vertices. So it's you need to be able to show or hide these components no matter what mode you're in to be a good modeling tool, just to give like the modeler control and visual feedback on where the actual vertices are and to get them out of the way at any time as well. Just while I'm here, can we talk about just wireframe opacity and thickness in general? Like this is just kind of ugly, to be frank. And like the wireframes are too black and too thick. You look at Modo, it just looks nicer. Like the wireframe opacity is only like 20% here, and that's plenty. If I put it up at 100% like that, it looks more like Cinema4D here. That's just like that's just way too much, man. I can also adjust wireframe thickness here. So if I move in, that's 1.5, which where I like it. This is 1. You can move it up like 2. You can make it thicker. I don't know. It's just thicker and less opaque. I think is a little bit better than just like super black. Okay, let's talk about toggling display properties on and off really quickly. Like wireframe mode, toggling on and off really quickly, toggling the grid on and off really quickly, isolating something really quickly, turning the inactive objects into wireframe while keeping the active object as a solid shaded mesh quickly, doing something like quickly hiding all the locators in the scene. When I say locators, I mean null objects, deformers, all the dynamics, forces, all the little things in the scene that are clutter up the scene. You want to like hide them really quickly. All of these are toggles, changing shading mode really quickly, showing hiding cameras or lights really quickly. Anything that you just need to toggle on or off is best done with a pie menu or a keyboard shortcut, and not a complex series of keyboard shortcuts or digging through a menu somewhere. And Cinema4D, all these things are like hidden in menus or require like multiple keyboard shortcut dancing finger motions. And part of this will go back to customization because you can't have multiple pie menus or customizable pie menus in Cinema4D. So what am I talking about here, right? Look at Cinema4D, just turning on and off wireframes, a thing you do all the time. In Cinema4D, this is a dancing finger exercise of NB and NA, right? So I'm going NB and NA sort of inexplicably. The other one. So again, these aren't easy to do, right? I'm sure all Cinema4D users at this point have somehow gotten used to like doing NB and NA without looking at the keyboard. I had to like look at the keyboard for a while. I'm finally getting okay not having to look at the keyboard. But a couple things. Why is it it's 4 keys to do this thing you do all the time? And it just at the minimum, it should be a toggle NB, and then it should just, when I fire this command, it should look to see if they're on. If they're on, I do NB again, it should turn them off, right? And if I do NB again, it should look to see if they're on or off and just do the opposite. They should just toggle. But instead, it's like 4 different keys and 2 different combinations to turn them on or off. Turning the grid off. And again, I just want to point out that I'm a Cinema4D noob, and there's going to be people who jump in the comments and say, oh, no, you just do this or that. Totally understand. I'm going to get a lot of this wrong. But as a new user, this is what I'm discovering, right? If I want to turn off the grid, I got to come up here and go through this filter and turn off the grid. I want to turn the grid back on. Got to come up here and turn it back on. If I want to turn this giant ass like axis on or off, just as an aside, the little one should be down here because you're always looking at the attribute manager anyway. So if you're always looking at the lower right corner, just move this little axis down here, please. Like doing these things, if I want to turn this to wireframe, then where I'm going over here to do this. And I realize there's some keyboard shortcuts for these as well. Again, this whole double thing you're doing with NA and B or whatever. But it's a lot of it's a lot of work for something that should be much easier and muscle memory, right? If I want to show cameras and lights or hide them, I should be able to toggle them on or off without ever thinking about it. If I want to hide all the locators or nulls in the scene, all the little things like, all the little deformers you get from the deformer, tool helpers you get, like from deformers or dynamics or joints or whatever. I should be able to hide those very easily, with a flick of the wrist, and not have to like go through a menu and start like, filtering and hiding all this stuff, right? And so if I look at Modo, it just accomplishes these things with pie menus, customizable pie menus. And pie menus are key to tapping into muscle memory to, again, enter the flow state and get this like UI out of the way. I don't want to like do some keyboard dance or use up precious like hotkeys just for wireframes. I just want to toggle them on or off, just with muscle memory. Boom, boom, right? So this Control-1, toggle pie menu lets me do things like toggle wireframes or toggle vertices or isolate an item like that, or turn everything in the background that's not selected into wireframe while keeping the main selected item solid. I just can toggle all this stuff, right? Toggle the grid on or off. You do this a million times. And you're just flicking the wrist with muscle memory. I'm not thinking about this. I don't have to take my hands off, to some other part of the keyboard. I don't have to dig through a menu. Just get this out of my way as fast as possible, right? I can, toggling locators would be that thing where I can, toggle lights and cameras. Like there's a camera, right? Off, on, light, on, off, right? Really easy. Don't have to think about it. And you commit these to muscle memory fairly quickly. And so if you're going to be a good modeling program, the artist is going to commit these things to muscle memory. It's going to happen. The newbie is it's going to take some time like to get used to it, but they're going to commit this to muscle memory very quickly too. And it's very easy to remember. It's just a direction, right? And the same with like, I'll get to this later with switching viewports or shading modes, right? If I want to go to wireframe, I can go to wireframe. If I want to go to advanced, I can go to advanced. If I want to go to like vertex map, I can go to vertex, weight maps, we call like fields or whatever, or vertex weights in Cinema4D. I can do all this very quickly, or reflection mode, which is important for modeling. Just again, without digging through a menu, without having to leave the center of the viewport, without having to like go through and do this stuff over here. I can just do it very quickly in Modo, and this needs to be doable in Cinema4D as well. Okay, hopefully I made my point with that. It's going to come back to customization, which I'll go back at the end of the video, because we need these pie menus. You need to make all of these toggles available as presets, so new users can commit them to muscle memory, and they need to be customizable so advanced users can add things or adjust them. Okay, the last one on our display list, and I realize this is more about visibility settings for toggling things and hiding things than it is like OpenGL display, but it's all sort of under display visibility. So you need to be able to hide and show both objects and components really quickly and easily, again, within the flow state, without having to go to a menu, without having to go to a right-click button or a top-down menu. Same with locking components. So again, let's look at Cinema4D here. If I want to hide components, I've got to come over here to these little buttons, which are rough, or I can right-click and I can hide and show, but I can't like hide inverted from here. I don't know if I could do a hide invert at all at the object level. And then again, I'm gonna have to come over here or right-click show everything. It's not conducive to fast modeling. We need keyboard shortcuts for this. I kind of touched on this in a previous video. I was actually kind of shocked there's no like show hide keyboard shortcuts. And the other issue is, of course, if I go into component mode, let me just isolate this. It's completely different commands. There is no show hide here. On the right click, you actually have to go into like a select menu and like show hide here, right? Like hide selected, hide unselected. If I want to show it, I've got to go back up to this menu. Now, I'm sure there's a way to customize Cinema4D, but there should be some sort of direct keyboard shortcut for these things. And it doesn't have to be a ton of keyboard shortcuts. And here, I don't want to step on animators, but I think we can do this with keyboard shortcuts. And again, animators, I think, would like to be able to show and hide objects without having to go to the traffic lights or have to go to the properties or have to go to right click, just a keyboard shortcut, right? So again, in Modo, this is another thing where in Cinema4D, they take like one operation, showing and hiding, and they spread it out to like 5 different areas. In Modo, it's just all consolidated to like 2 keys for both objects and components. I can, hide or H or U, hide or unhide. I can Shift H to hide unselected, unhide. I can Shift H, or I can just hide selected and Control H to invert that, and then U to unhide. So I can hide selected with H, hide unselected with a Shift H, invert the selection with Control H. Just one keyboard shortcut, accessible from my left hand. Don't have to look at the screen. Or I can unhide with U. It's a little bit of a stretch, but you may have to glance to the keyboard, but it also makes some cognitive sense there for hide and unhide H and U. And it works for components too, right? So I can go into polygon mode. If I want to hide that, H, U, unhide. If I want to hide unselected, Shift H. If I want to invert it, Control H, U, unhide. Same keyboard shortcuts, just same key. I'm just using H and U, and that's it. That's it. And it works for both components and objects. And it's super important because if I'm going through here and I want to hide some stuff just to work on something, but that's super fast. And then unhide. In Cinema4D, what I just did is a huge pain in the ass, right? It's just a huge pain in the ass. And it needs to be better. Now, same with like locking and unlocking. So again, if I want to lock this, I just hit J. See how it's kind of green? It's locked. Control J, inverts, just like Control H, inverts, right? If I want to do unlock, it's just I, right? And then if I want to invert lock, let's say J lock that, is just Control, just like Control H is invert hide. And so I can Control J invert the locking, or I can let's go to vertice mode. You can see that better maybe. So I can invert that. I can unlock it. I can lock these. Like it's all on one hand, and it's just the same. It's just 2 keys, J and H, and then Control and H. Control and Shift are the modifiers for invert and unselected. Just like for hiding, Control H and Shift H are for invert and unselected. And so again, it's just super fast. I'm not even sure Cinema4D has locking, to be honest. Like, I'm sure somebody will jump in and tell me, oh, it's just this. But like, if I want to lock, these, like, I don't know how to do it. As far as I can tell, it's not in the right click anywhere. I don't know if it's in select anywhere. Locking is locking. Can you lock things? I don't know that you can. So there's that, right? Hiding and locking, it should be very accessible. I don't think we're stomping on any Cinema4D animation, animators here by giving us a key to do that. It doesn't have to be exactly the same as Modo, but it has to be as efficient as Modo, or use modifiers of the same key and not this weird like 2-key, double key dance thing where turning things on and off requires 4 keys. Okay, let's talk about navigation. I'll try to get through this chapter quickly. Non-camera perspective view. What do I mean? Well, if you use any other 3D program, you know what I'm talking about. Just a work view. Just a work view without all the camera overlays and everything that kind of get in your way that you have to turn on and off, that take you out of the flow state, right? So again, going into Cinema4D, when I first started using this, I was just like, wait a minute, the default camera, the work view, the perspective view has camera overlays on by default. I thought that was really weird. And again, I know this is mostly an animation program, but surely it also gets in the way of animation. And these settings need to be moved over to the cameras, not the viewport, right? So if I'm looking through the viewport here, let me do a resolution that's like, because this changes depending on what resolution you have. That's even more sort of goofy. So like do like a portrait mode, right? Like look how thick like the render view, like the safe render area is, this darkened area. And look how distorted the camera is. Now, yes, if I was working, I could if I'm modeling, I could keep it at a certain 16:9 aspect ratio, and yes, you can turn these off. But again, you're just taking me out of it, right? So if I'm working on a portrait render and I need to pop into the model and change some modeling operation or animation operation, I don't want to be dealing with this in my perspective view. Like, it makes sense for the camera view. I'm looking through the Redshift camera now to have this stuff, and it makes sense to have title safe and action safe on this camera view. But all of these attributes are stuck to the viewport, not the camera. So if I'm like, okay, this looks good, but I need to fix something on this piece of this model here, and I go to my default camera, I'm like, all this stuff is still on screen. So then I've got to go like turn it off or maybe change the resolution so it's not so distorted and then fix it. And then I look through my camera view again. I'm like, oh, okay, I got to turn all this stuff back on now over here or wherever it is. And so it's very, wherever it is here, it's like very like annoying. And all this stuff should be on the cameras, not the viewport, right? Because it just gets in the way of working, and not just modeling. I can imagine like Cinema4D animators aren't crazy about this stuff either. I mean, it can be useful to render out of the perspective view. Don't get me wrong. That's a useful thing. But it's not like the most useful thing. It like gets in the way. And if you're rendering an animation, or if you're rendering stills, you will have an actual camera in the scene. At most, it just lets you like kind of go check out areas, in your scene without having to add an extra sort of junk camera to like check out some detail somewhere without messing up your main camera. So again, just to show this in Modo, I've got a camera view that's going to have the matte boxes and any sort of camera overlays I put on this. I'm going to let's go to display, and then we'll add some show camera overlay. Any of these camera overlays I have, and if I want to add some chevrons or some grids or whatever, they're just on the camera, and I can always go to my perspective view, and all that stuff's gone, right? So the focal length, all that stuff on the camera, just the resolution, it's not going to hurt me in all the camera safe areas and grids and chevrons. They're not attached to the viewport; they're attached to the camera, and I have multiple cameras with different overlays, and a nice clean viewport to work on. I can put them side to side or side by side if I want to, right? So here's the perspective view for working, and here's the camera view for framing, right? That's the way I think it needs to be in Cinema4D, and I'm hoping people agree with me on this one. There's also something called flatness of perspective that some modelers like to tweak, and you can do this in Modo, but just because of the way Cinema4D is set up, I mean, you can probably do it through some labyrinthine, set of menu options or something. But, if I look at a CAD program like Plasticity, you see how this looks a little bit distorted and weird versus if I click this button, it looks a little more normal to a 3D guy or 3D animation person. A lot of CAD people like to have this sort of 100%, perspective correction on here or flatness on here where it gives a little more, I guess, what they tell me is it gives a little more accuracy in terms of navigation and getting to where you need to be. But I prefer to work like this. But in Modo, you can change this, right? You can go over to Modo, and you can just go to preferences. You can just dial in whatever flatness of perspective you like. So if you like it like a CAD program at 100%, you can do that. Like 60% or something is the default. Looks great. This is what we're all kind of used to. But again, you can dial that in, and it's just affecting the perspective viewport, and it leaves your cameras alone, right? It leaves your cameras alone. Okay, let's talk about using a pie menu for changing the orthographic cameras. This is less of an issue now in the latest version of Cinema4D. So I love it now that I can just hold Control and snap. That's fantastic. That's how ZBrush works as well. So yeah, it's great. Love it. Love it. I still think there's room for a pie menu in here. Right now, I tend to use the F keys. I think a lot of Cinema4D people do F1, F2, F3, F4. That's really only getting you to 4 views, though. And as far as I could tell, there's no modifier to get to the back or the left or the bottom. Maybe there is. I think most people just probably go in here. Again, it takes you out of the flow state and puts you in a menu. Again, control snapping is great, but it's also easier sometimes maybe just to have a configurable pie menu. So in Modo, again, you just have a pie menu. This is control space. And it makes sense logically, and it's just muscle memory, right? Up is top, down is bottom, left is left, right is right. you got perspective, you got camera, you got back, and you got front. Now, all of these can be faster than holding, getting to your view and pressing control, right? If I'm right here, navigating to the top and pressing control to snap, works, and it's better maybe than having to use one of 4 shortcut keys, F keys, taking my finger off the home row to get to like just half the different views options. But having doing this is just super fast, and it's faster even than the control snap. So I think there's room in Cinema4D to have that. I think it's probably a necessity, and I think it'll be used. And so, yeah, that's a quick one. Let's go to trackball navigation. If you're wondering what trackball navigation is, go into a Blender forum and say you're a former Modo user and you're wondering where the trackball navigation is. And there's going to be a huge threads about it, because trackball navigation in Modo is super useful, and it's super useful for modeling. So, but actually Cinema4D has something that's very similar. So again, this is kind of a small one. So if I look at Cinema, normally we're in, what's called like the cursor navigation. So I click, you see like a little plus there, and it navigates from where the cursor is. It's a cool mode, it's good. It's not necessarily great for modeling. So in modeling, I really want to keep everything in the center. If I if I'm not really being really precise about where I'm clicking with the cursor, if I click over here and rotate, I just lose everything, right? Now I'm getting all this over here. Or if then I have to rotate it back and pan and all this stuff. It does have a navigation mode called object mode, where it's going to sort of navigate around whatever object is there, and like that's in the center. And I think that's pretty great. Like that's basically, no matter where I click, it just kind of keeps it in the center. That's a really good mode for modeling. So in Modo, it's called trackball mode. It's a little bit different. It's sort of like there's a virtual, trackball like sphere around your object. I can go all the way around and kind of really accurately zoom in wherever I want to, and orbit around whatever I want to. I can also go in like this and then bank on either side like this. And so it's a really useful mode. You talk to longtime Modo modelers. People have worked on, Star Wars or The Matrix or whatever. People have been doing Doom. They really like trackball navigation, and once it just really feels like holding a model in your hand and getting around it. So I think maybe some tweaks to center mode, object mode, and Cinema4D would get the job done. All right, let's talk about framing items selected, unselected in the viewport. It seems like a small thing, but it's not, because it's just sort of emblematic of how Cinema4D works and how it's just really inefficient, in my opinion, and overcomplicates things that should be easy. So if I want to frame something, if I want to frame all the geometry, I press H. Great, easy enough, that works. H is accessible by my left hand. If I want to frame just the selected geometry, item, not components, item, I have to press O. O makes me look at the keyboard. I have to look at the keyboard to press O, because I just can't left hand all the way to O, or take my right hand off the tablet pad or mouse to press O. That's not good. You don't want to do that. It takes you out of the flow state. And when I go back into components, right, so I'm here and I press 3, I'm in a component mode. O doesn't frame that now. It's a third keyboard shortcut, S, frames it. Which just seems unnecessary. O should just do it. O should frame that too, right? That's what I'm working on. So if I go over here to Modo, again, Modo just makes it really easy, right? And it adds some more features as well. So A is just gonna frame everything. Shift A is just gonna frame the selected thing. And this works in component mode, and so here in polygon mode and object mode. So again, A is going to frame all the components, and Shift A is just going to frame what's selected. So it's just, it's just one key. It works with items and components. Any sort of advantage of separating those out, I think, is, being able to show frame the components separate from the item, I don't think is super useful. Having them all in one key, accessible by the left hand, is super useful, right? I can also Control A, if I go back over here, and I can align that camera to the selected items. And I can also align Control Shift A, align frame those selected items. So if I want to do a UV projection on these guys from the camera view, super easy. I can align it and frame it, and it's all with the A key. A, Shift A, Control A, Shift Control A. All on A, all on the left hand, all with modifiers, works in components, works in objects. I can also do aligning, so it's more functional than what Cinema4D offers, and it's all on one key. It's kind of like hiding and locking. They're all just like one key or two keys, and using consistent shift and control modifiers. Cinema4D really needs this, and I think I don't think this interferes with Cinema4D animators, having some sort of more efficient keyboard shortcut like this. So let's talk about this last one again, Alt-Nav. Okay, so let's talk about 1, 2, 3 navigation. I think this is the first. Segment that's going to cause a lot of friction with current Cinema4D users. So when I was first shown Cinema4D by Maxon Trainer a few months ago, I was astounded that 1, 2, 3 defaulted to navigation. And I'm sure there's a history behind this. This may be back when, this was really popular on Macs and had one button mice, and this is the best way to do it. Alt-Nav, Maya-style Alt-Nav was added 20 years ago. Apparently people have not migrated over. And somebody on the PixelFun Discord told me, a Cinema user, that they think like up to a third of all Cinema4D users use 1, 2, 3 navigation, which maybe I'm just missing something here. Maybe if you're just doing animation, it's fairly close to the transform keys, so maybe that's useful. It does just use one mouse button. So, if you're using a tablet, it's just a press. You don't have to deal with the rocker keys. If you're using a mouse, you don't have to deal with this garbage middle mouse button key. By the way, back when Maya navigation was out, like this is going to sound weird, but this is sort of pre-scroll wheel being standard. If you had an SGI or something like Silicon Graphics machine, which I'm old enough to have used, they had just a button in the middle, and so like middle mouse button navigation actually made more sense. Anyway, so the problem is, and this is going to have to be a preference, if you want to be good at modeling, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, they have to be for component selection, right? So let's just jump into Cinema4D and take a look at navigation first. So obviously you can do Alt-Nav, Alt-Maya-style nav, like Alt-Left, Middle, Right. And the 1, 2, 3 nav, you're pressing the 1, 2, 3 keys. But if you're going to be doing modeling, pressing 1, 2, 3 to cycle between, verts, edges, polys, and objects 4 is just paramount, because coming up here and clicking is just not good, right? And so let's break this down into two ways. One, if you like just using one button, you can do that with Alt, and that's how Modo operates by default. So let's look at Modo really quickly. So Modo does do Maya-style navigation, but it did improve upon it. So if I look at Modo here, and I look at the Alt navigation, Alt left mouse is rotate, just like you'd expect. Control Alt left mouse is zoom, and Shift Alt left mouse is pan. So you're just using one mouse button, just like you would in 1, 2, 3 nav, and it's great. It's better than using Maya-style nav. And I think all those keys are free in Cinema4D. I think we can get Modo-style navigation in Cinema4D. You can also do a cool thing where you can do a turntable swipe or spin or throw, where you actually do Alt right mouse to like throw your model and do a quick little, if you're really fast, you can wing it. If you have a really good graphics card like my 4090, you can really whip that. Oh no, you can really whip that sucker. Sometimes you get that though. Boom. You can kind of test your frame rate. But and if you're really good, you can like throw and catch to like get to other sides of the model really quickly. But anyway, you can do all left mouse button by using Control Alt and Shift Alt in addition to Alt to navigate. So I think that would make some people happy and get you away from 1, 2, 3, because using 1, 2, 3 for components is really it's just really paramount, right? So 1, 2, 3 going from between vertices, edges, polygons, and then also Alt 1, 2, 3 to convert. So you can convert in Cinema4D, right? So I can go in here and I can grab these and I can convert to vertices and I convert to edges and convert back to polys, but I have to control click on these guys. Again, I'm getting out of the zone, I'm getting out of the flow state, I'm having to come up here and click around on stuff. I just want to stay down here and use keyboard shortcuts. So it's really imperative to get 1, 2, 3 for selection, and also Alt 1, 2, 3 for converting, and also Control Alt to get a boundary convert. So if I want a boundary convert, let's say I want this boundary here, because I want to do a bevel, I would do Control Alt 2 to get that boundary, and then I can go in here and bevel that boundary up a little bit if I want to. Okay, so I think that covers navigation. Let's move on to selection. Okay, selection. This is a big one of the biggest ones, because selection is super important for modeling. If you want to be a great modeling app, you have to have great selection workflow. Not tools, workflow. So in Cinema4D, it's just so Cinema4D. It's got all these tools. It's got marquee selection tools, all kinds of marquee selection tools, and paint selection tools, and loop and ring selection tools, and coplanar selection tools. And it's got the ability to select within various modeling tools, but it varies between tools. And all the selection modifiers of growing, shrinking, inverting selections are requiring sort of keyboard dancing and looking at the keyboard, and all this stuff requires multiple tools. There's no selection commands as far as I can tell. I'll explain that in a little bit. Basically, I'm just going to try and point out some of these deficiencies. I'm going to show how Modo has a selection mode that I think we can maybe make it into a selection tool in Cinema4D. This will require some development, or maybe a plugin developer will take this on. Because the general workflow of using a keyboard shortcut to activate a modeling tool, pressing space to get to the last used selection tool, making a new selection, then activating a new modeling tool with a different keyboard shortcut, and then doing your modeling operation, hitting space, getting back to that selection tool. If that selection tool covers all the bases, that's a good workflow. If that selection tool is broken up into 8 different selection tools, that's not a good workflow. So let's see what we can do here, and I'll do my best to try and explain this. Okay, so let's start this selection process here by just sort of isolating this faceplate here, going to poly mode, and you'll see there's just a lot of selection tools, right? All these sort of lasso selections, marquee selections, brush selections, loop and ring. You've got a bunch of select stuff up here as well, like outline and fill, and I think pattern is in there somewhere. Also pressing U, you have all these selection modifiers like inverting and growing. And again, the U key is not handy. It's on, I have to look at the keyboard really to do that, unless you're really gotten good at finding the U key with your index finger of your left hand. You're probably looking at the keyboard. You don't want to look at the keyboard when you're modeling. It takes you right out of the flow state, right? So, let's take a look at the brush selection really quick, just so I can illustrate a point. So, yep, I can paint select, right? Great. And just one little thing here, I do not like that move tool showing up there. And this might just be a me thing. I get it. Like maybe Cinema4D users like that. To me, it's just in the way. I have often nudged the move tool by accidentally clicking on a handle and dragging a little bit when I think I'm selecting something. Also, it makes me think it'll confuse me sometimes. It makes me think the move tool is active, and the move tool has completely different selection abilities than the brush tool, or the brush select tool. So again, I don't think it's great. The move shortcut key is right there. It's just right there. E. It's easy to press. I get it. Maxon's trying to be helpful. I think like, hey, here's a handle. You can move it if you want. If I wanted to move it, I'd just press E. I'm not a fan of this thing constantly popping up, and I know a lot of other people aren't either, but maybe Cinema4D users are. But aside from that, let's take a look at middle mouse. Middle mouse lets me adjust the size. This is fantastic. I can stay in the flow state. I don't have to come over here and do this and then adjust. Oh, not big enough. Then come over here again and adjust. It keeps me doing what I want to do. So let's keep that in mind as I move on to the marquee selection tool, right? And so this one operates differently, completely differently, depending on whether or not this tiny little checkbox over here is checked. So when it's not checked, it'll select through the mesh. Now, I have no idea. There's that move tool again. Love that move tool. I'm just trying to lasso select this, but what am I doing? I'm moving it, right? So I got to move my cursor over here and lasso select, or marquee select. I'm also getting all these backside things. Why am I getting all these backside polygons? I can't see them here. Oh my God, I got these. It's because this isn't checked. So the only way to fix that is come over here and check that. And now I can get what I want, right? Yay. Thing is, like, it's just taking me out of the flow state to come over here and check this, or I have to look over there and see if it's checked every time I use this. So we used middle mouse for brush select to do something to keep us, focused on the center of the screen. Why is, visible only not mapped to right mouse button or middle mouse button? So I can just left mouse go through, or left mouse go through, uncheck that, left mouse go through, and then, have, either middle or right, just do front facing. And I'm going to get back to this in a minute in terms of how Modo's tools work, but I'm just sort of creating a compilation of these things, which are all solved with Modo's selection tools. So now let's look at like the move tool. The move tool is, I see Cinema4D users saying, well, I just actually use the move tool as my selection tool. That's crazy to me. If you have users using the move tool as your selection tool, that tells me you don't have the right selection tool implemented. But the move tool has good selection abilities. I can double click connected. I can, click select. I can right mouse paint select. I can, control shift select, shortest path, which is pretty great. I can, double click loops, which is awesome. So it's pretty good, but it's also missing things. I can't marquee select while I'm in here, right? I cannot get a poly loop while I'm in here. I have to jump out and get a different tool. So it's missing some things. So I'm ultimately always using multiple tools. So if I'm trying to do some sort of little bevel operation here, I'm probably going to end up using 3 different tools. I'm going to use the marquee select here, and whoops, I got to check this, right? Because I want to get through. So I'm doing this like that. And then I want a couple more loops. So I'm probably going to go over here to like the loop tool. So now I've just done 2 tools. I'm going to get, like this loop and this loop. And then I'm going to get this loop and this loop. And then I want to select some individual polys. So I'm going to go to my bevel tool, or I can go to the move tool, or I can go to the brush tool. Let's just go to the bevel tool, and because I'm going to illustrate another problem. So I'm going to go to the bevel tool, and I'm like, okay, so I can click select here, right? So I want this one, and I'm going to click select this one, and 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 oops, I also got that one. Let me just control click to deselect it. It doesn't work. Like what? Are you kidding me? I can click select, but I can't control click deselect with this tool. It just completely changes tool to tool. Also, I can't right click like paint select. If I right click, I just get the menu. I can't paint select. I can't get loops. I can't, what am I beveling? Probably loops oftentimes. So I can't get a loop. Can I get a loop and double click? Nope. So it's just, there's this hodgepodge of tools, selection tools, that you have to use multiple selection tools to get the selection you want. You have to, each modeling tool has some sort of built-in selection, I guess, into the tool, but it varies widely between tools, and it's completely insufficient, as we saw with the bevel tool. Let's look at selection modifiers, right? So if I go back here, and let's just get some loops, I guess. Let's get this loop and this loop. And the effect I'm trying to get here is I'm just trying to do some bevel details here, right, on my mesh. But so I got a couple of loops here. Let's say I want to grow this selection, right? So what's the keyboard shortcut for that? Let me just lift my stylus off the pad, because if I don't lift my stylus off the pad, completely lift it up in the air, and I try to get this little Coord menu to pop up, it just flashes, because if I move my pointer a pixel, it disappears. And this caused me problems when I first learning the program, because I thought I was doing something wrong. I was like, why is that flashing? It took me a while to realize it's reading the precision of 1 pixel waver on my stylus, and it's making the menu vanish because it wasn't happening with my mouse. Anyway, so that seems like a bug to me. But so lifting up my stylus, and then I'm pressing U, and whoops, lifting up my stylus and pressing U. If I want to grow this selection, what is it, like UK or something? That's shrink selection. What's grow selection? somewhere in this list. Oh, UI. Okay, so right. So UI. Right? Or if I want to shrink, UK. It's like some sort of finger exercise class. What am I doing here? Like, why am I? I have to look at the keyboard because it's on the right side of the keyboard. I've got to like double tap, like I'm playing like a really difficult video game with bad key mapping to try and get like just basic grow and shrink selections, which you do all day, every day in modeling. And it's like a really difficult workflow. So this is kind of the thing where like, invert is that's probably I or something usable. Who knows? I? Yes, invert is I. So that's nice at least. So it's just, again, I'm not trying to belabor the point, and I'm not trying to attack Cinema4D here. It's just, here's the frustrating thing. It's like you have all the tools. Like the selection modifiers are there. The selection tools are there. The selection workflow is not there. So there is actually a selection workflow that I do like in Cinema4D that I think we can leverage with a better selection tool. So, again, let me just go here and do like a marquee selection and just make sure I have what I want. And then I'll do a keyboard shortcut. So let's do a modeling tool. So with the modeling tools, not the modeling tools, but all of these little menus, it seems like they're in alphabetical order for the keyboard shortcut, like A, B, C from top to bottom. That's not super helpful if I know the name of the command I'm trying to find. Like I'm trying to find bevel, that should be near the top, B, right? Bevel near the top, so I can see B and then whatever key it is. But instead, I've got to read this whole list looking for bevel because it's not in alphabetical order. It's in alphabetical order for the keyboard shortcut, which is not. Who cares, right? It's not helpful at all when trying to find something. So where's I can't remember what bevel is. It's like S, of course. So anyway, so you do the keyboard shortcut for your tool, and then you space and go back to your last used selection tool. So I think that's a really nice workflow because then I can just, go back to my bevel tool and, do a slightly different bevel here or whatever. And I think we can leverage that if we can consolidate all of these selection tools and selection modifiers into one cohesive sort of uber selection tool that we can then get back to with this spacebar shortcut. So let's look at how Modo does selection, and let's see if we could bring that Modo selection mode into Cinema4D as a selection tool. Okay, let's talk about Modo's selection mode. So Modo has selection tools, like Cinema4D has selection tools, but it also has a selection mode. And this is how you usually work, is you select something, you do a tool, and you drop the tool, then you select something else, and you do another tool. And that's very similar to Cinema4D's do a select something, use a tool, hit spacebar to get back to selection, use another tool, so on and so forth, right? Except Modo's selection mode is sort of all of Cinema4D's selection tools wrapped into one. And you can totally bring Modo's entire selection mode that it does very well and covers 90% of your selection needs into a single tool in Cinema4D. So while I'm in Modo's selection mode, I can click, left mouse click. I'm just holding shift here to add to the selection to click select. And also left mouse, if I just drag, I can paint select, right? So I can click select and paint select and holding shift and control to deselect or add to the selection. Very much like the move tool selection sort of paradigm within Cinema4D. I can also select between using the right mouse button, right? Just shift and I'm selecting between. Do that with edges, right mouse, selecting between. So again, it's kind of like I think it's control shift select in Cinema4D with the move tool. So it should be kind of similar to the move tool so far. But what's nice is I can also marquee select here using the right and middle buttons. And what's nice is right button will just select what's visible. Let me just convert those to polys. So I'm just getting what's in front of me, just a visible selection. And if I want to, say, get all those bottom ones, I can middle mouse, and it's going to select like everything that it's just going to select through the geometry, right? If I miss a few, just hold Shift and hold Control to paint select those away. So again, if I'm in Cinema4D, I marquee select this. Let's say I marquee select this and check the little checkbox, and I miss a few or have some stuff I don't want. I have to switch to another tool to get rid of these guys. In Modo, you just hold Shift and Control and just paint them away. So much faster. So I'm using all 3 mouse buttons, and I'm able to marquee select all the way through it, or just the facing without having to press a checkbox. I can also make use of double click. Double click will select connected, just like the move tool. If you're wondering why that's the same, it's because Modo innovated this stuff 20 years ago, and it's filtered its way through other programs now. Like double clicking a loop, that's pure Modo 101 magic right there, and it's great. We all use that now. And again, so you can double click select in the selection mode, right? But there's more. I can also do pattern selection right here in the selection mode. So I just click this guy, say I skip 2, click another, and just up arrow. I've done a pattern selection, right? Click, click, up arrow, pattern selection. Works with edges too. Click every other one. I'm just going to hold the up arrow. It's going to go all the way around. And then I can do something like fire a loop command. It's going to do those loops. If I don't want those on the top, I could just paint them away without having to access a loop tool, right? A loop select tool. I just got them, fine, very easy to do. Now I can do my thing, right? So those are all built into selection mode, and all the selection modifiers are built in as well, and they're just using the arrow keys. So again, I can just grow this, Shift up arrow, shrink, Shift down arrow. So you're just holding Shift and going up arrow, down arrow, right? And this is a very common way to select things. So if I'm doing, let me just hide this guy. So I'm in here, oftentimes I may just grab a couple of these like this and loop select those with the L key, and then grow up or down depending on how much I want. It's a very fast way of selecting. And in Cinema4D, you're looking at multiple tools to do that, and it's pretty rough when you want to stay in the zone of modeling. So again, you can do up arrow and down arrow. You can get these arrow keys and the Shift key without looking at your keyboard. You can play a video game with arrow keys. You don't have to look at the keyboard. Now, you do have to lift your right hand up. If you're holding a stylus, you just kind of rock it up, arrow keys. If you got a mouse, you got to let go of it. But it's super fast. It's not doing this finger exercise dance you're doing in Cinema4D with UK and U, UK and U, what is it, UI? So just Shift up and down, right? Very easy. Again, you're just using arrow keys here. So if I want to do a loop, I can just start a loop. I don't have to do a loop tool. I just start the loop, hit L. I don't have to, look at the keyboard. Well, L, you might have to look at the keyboard. I will say that. So, but I think keeping it on L is fine. And then, again, you can do that with edges as well, L, or you can do rings with Alt-L like that. But you don't have to switch tools. So I'm just firing commands. And so if I have a command here, let's say I've got this loop, I can walk loops as well. Again, I'm just using left and right arrow keys. So I can walk loop, grow it, shrink it, walk it, right? I can convert those to edges or boundaries right here. And then I can, again, walk these loops like this. So walking edge loops is a super important thing to be able to do. If you're sub-D modeling, you want to be able to walk edge loops and make adjustments while you're walking the edge loops. And you can walk the edge loops like this. And at any point in time, I can hold Control and just add to it, right? I'm going the other direction now with the left arrow. I'm adding this direction. If I want to add this loop at the top here, I just hold Shift and I walk the other way with the other arrow and get that. I can walk back down and get the bottom too. So there's just, super useful, right? You can marquee select, you can paint select, you can click select, you can marquee through or visible. You can pattern select, you can select between. You can grow and shrink selections really easily with just the arrow keys. You can walk loops and grow them or shrink them with just the arrow keys. And there's probably some more I'm missing, but it's all one tool. And you can certainly bring this one tool into Cinema4D and just fix your workflow so you're mostly using that selection mode and a couple of selection commands. Like basically, you can still, invert and select connected in Modo. I can invert or select connected. Let me just do it with polygon. So I can, invert with a key or select connected with a key. So select connected, and then the one right next to it is the bracket key, just invert. So, those are left-handed keyboard shortcuts, but they're right next to each other. So I think they make a decent amount of sense. And I'm not suggesting changing every single selection key, but bringing the growing, shrinking, and the walking to the arrow keys is, I think, super important. And being able to have a command that fires a loop in addition to a tool is important. Because if I'm down here and I want to do some beveling and I, grab some, let's do my loop tool. So I grabbed a couple loops, right? And let's say I miss one. I've got my bevel tool going here. And I want to grab one more loop. I should just be able to grab a couple polygons, activate, just hit L, get that loop and go. Instead, I do this U key and then I do the L key and it puts me in like loop mode, and then I click it, I guess. And then I've got to hit space to go back to bevel tool, and now I can do what I want to do. So, it's just lacking. And it's lacking in workflow and a few features. And I know this is a long segment, but if we could bring Modo's selection mode and some of these keyboard shortcuts, specifically with the arrow keys, into Cinema4D, I think that would be super, super, super helpful. And it's really going to streamline the modeling process. You're really just going to have one selection tool that's going to take care of almost all your needs. Much easier growing, shrinking, loop walking, honestly inverting and connecting, all that stuff. Much easier marquee selection, select through, no checkboxes. And yeah, I just think if we could bring that into Cinema4D, it would be super, super useful. So Modo also has a stats list. Well, I'll show you really quick. So this is the stats list in Modo. So you can look at basically your geometry here, your vertices, edges, polygons, and it's going to list all the polygon selection sets. It's going to list like, all, you could just easily select like all the ingons or all the tries, or, all the, if you want to check and see if you have floating vertices that are attached to 0 polygons, you can select those but had them, or all the vertices that are only attached to 1 polygon, or all the vertices that are attached to ingons. Just this whole stats list here, right? I can go in here under polygons and do like just the Catmull-Clark sub-Ds, or just the faces, or any curves or anything that happen to be in this mesh. And again, apologize if Cinema4D has this and I just don't know it well enough. It seems like a lot of this stuff is handled by tags in Cinema4D. But having this comprehensive stats list where you can select sort of any type of edge or polygon or vertex or selection set based on some parameters, some statistical parameters, is super useful. But mostly what I wanted to do with this selection section is show how Cinema4D has some like real issues with taking you out of the flow state of modeling and having to go through and check boxes, or go to menus, or switch to multiple selection tools, or wonder why certain selection mechanisms work in one modeling tool but not another, and really look at Modo's selection mode. And I don't think there's anything in Modo's selection mode that would break anything in Cinema4D. So again, I don't want to break anything in Cinema4D. Bringing Modo's selection mode into a tool into Cinema4D to letting you do all of that selection and selection modification with the arrow keys, walking loops and growing things and all that stuff, would be super helpful for the modeling workflow. And I think really essential in making Cinema4D a great modeler. It just can't be a great modeler with the current selection workflow. No matter how many tools you throw at it, the workflow is just too messy. Okay, modeling tools. We're at the modeling section. I've been doing this all day, and I'm just now getting to the modeling section of this video. And I've got 2 full slides of modeling things to talk about. I don't think I'm going to make it. I don't think I'm going to make it through this video. Or it's going to be 10 hours long, which is even worse for you guys. So I'm going to have chapters. If you're just getting to this chapter, just to reiterate, I'm not trying to go through every single thing, every single modeling tool and say what could be better. I'm trying to focus on how to improve the modeling workflow to keep the artist in the zone, focused in the flow state on what they're doing on the screen and not being distracted by workflow and user interface issues that could be streamlined. Okay, new day, new t-shirt. I know this is a 2.5 hour video, but I think this is helpful, so I'm adding to the video. But honestly, if you look at Cinema4D, I made what I thought would be sort of like a time-lapse view of modeling something in Cinema4D and modeling something in Modo. So imagine you're tracking the finger movements and you're tracking the mouse cursor over the course of modeling something. And this is sort of what you would get in Cinema4D versus Modo. In Modo, almost all your mouse action is here in the middle. You're almost never over here, right? Because you can select items in the viewport. At most you're going to the stats list to do some statistical selection. You've got pop-up item attributes here. So you don't have to go over here to item properties. If you don't need to, you can just pop them up. You have all these, omni-hall scrolling, so you can just scroll almost all of your attributes, and you can hit tab to dial in the exact number. So again, you don't have to go over here. You don't have to go up here at all because all these Falloffs, action centers, all this stuff, it's all on pie menus, right? Which we don't have in Cinema4D. You may have to go up here and hit, symmetry or something. Because I don't think there's a hotkey for that, but there is for, snapping. So it's really efficient. You're just really here. And again, in the keyboard as well, if you kind of look in the middle of the keyboard here, this is left hand. So this is what you're doing, without having to look at the keyboard or lift your hand off the mouse or stylus. And almost all modeling operations are over there. And these arrow keys here, you can also hit without looking at the keyboard very easily. And that's for your selection, ring walking and growing and shrinking, things like that. You have inverting and selecting connected here, which you generally do have to, even after using Modo for a long time, you kind of have to look at the keyboard. But almost all of the hotkeys are over here. And like holding Alt and using these keys for action centers is very fast, right? Things like Falloffs are on pie menus, and changing all the toggles and selection, display modes are on pie menus. Cinema4D, on the other hand, you're in here doing your modeling, but you always have to go over here to do a bunch of attributes because there's almost no draggable attributes, right? Usually just one draggable attribute on one mouse button. And there's no way to enter numeric data from the viewport. You have to come over here to the attribute manager constantly. And also you deal with attribute manager losing focus, things like that. You're coming up here to the object manager because you're also probably dealing with visibility in the object manager, as well as some other things like doing a lot of selection. I think people do a lot of selection up here on the object manager, which I'll get to in a second. And then, of course, you're using all these tools for modeling. If you're not doing keyboard shortcuts or ones that aren't on keyboard shortcuts, you've got all the primitive tools over here. You got to get to the drop-down menus for a lot of selection operations. You've got, like Element Action Center and, all your Workplane stuff. You have to click up here instead of hotkeys, so you're up here all the time. Action centers are all right-click or down here. On the keyboard, again, it's like the main modeling hotkey is here. That's right-handed. The main selection hotkey is here, probably right-handed, or you have to look at the keyboard and use your left hand. You may have to use your, depending on how you work, that's how you're working. This one is also right-handed. That's for display modes. There's no pie menu for quickly flipping around display modes from wireframe to shaded, etc. You're coming up here to change your views. You're coming, and these, there's some decent modeling operations over here. But there's just a lot more movement in Cinema4D. And I don't think you're sacrificing anything for animators by moving the modeling key somewhere over here and the selection key somewhere over here and putting the displays on a pie menu so you can quickly flip around. And a lot of us, there's just... I don't say there's not a lot of thought involved, but there could be more thought involved on the modeling side for how things work. For instance, if I'm in here and I'm just selecting some, again, I've got to go over here, or I've got to move my hand all the way over to the right side of the keyboard, look at the keyboard to hit the 0 hotkey for this. If I select this, and I do like a bevel operation, right? Okay, cool, I like that, looks awesome. And I come up here to object mode, and I want to work on something else to then model. I'm still in the bevel tool, even though I'm in object mode. And there's nothing I can bevel here, right? And so why am I not just going straight into like a click selection tool, and then instead of having to like make the user do that, right? So, you know, when I'm doing a Cinema4D, if I want to model on this, then I have to either find it over here, and this list could be super long, or I have to come over and pick a selection tool here, or again, use my, you know, look at the keyboard to hit like the 9 key or something and get like a selection tool. And then I've got to then come up here and go back into component mode. And then I got to go down here, and then I can maybe do my double click hotkey for a bevel mode, or actually maybe stay in you know, a selection mode and do something like this. And then I can then do my beveling. Okay, now I look at Modo. If I'm on this guy and I'm just, you know, firing a loop selection command instead of having to go to a tool and doing a bevel, I think that's cool. If I don't even have to drop the tool, I can just use the keyboard shortcut to go to item mode. I'm directly into my selection tool. So I can directly select 3, 4 polygons. I don't even have to go to a loop selection tool, just L, and then B for bevel, and just 1 shortcut key, not 2, and I can go. So that's the type of stuff this is why this video is so long, but this is the type of stuff I'm talking about when I don't think there's anything you're taking away from an animator by dropping if you're going from component mode to item mode, model mode, just drop the model tool and go to selection mode automatically. How can we like take the extra step to like really finish this up? You know, so looking at my list right here, tool handles or the lack of that we'll talk about, and jump into Cinema4D because we're really talking about entering data, right? That's what we're talking about. So I'm actually going to skip our mech here and just add a cube and isolate it. And then let's just get some segments here. So I thought I'd be really annoyed with the having to press C to edit and just always starting with the procedural, but I'm not. It's fine. It's just fine. So we're going to press C and make it editable. We're going to go to poly mode, grab some polygons, get annoyed at the move tool that's there because I don't want to move them. And then I'm going to activate the bevel tool. And I'm going to notice as a new user that there's no tool handles. No tool handles. It's kind of weird, Maxon, that there's no tool handles for this. I'm just supposed to know how to use this because, you know, when you look at this, if I just start dragging, and by the way, dragging is a great way to input data. It's really the best way. But there's no indication that I should be holding shift to change the offset, right? And so it's not like it's not a very intuitive tool. And the lack of tool handles is not super helpful, right? And also having to use modifiers for adjusting the offset is really weird because I'm really just dragging left, right. Now here I've lifted the mouse button here. I lifted my stylus up. I've done a like major sort of sin here in Cinema4D by lifting my stylus up or letting go of the mouse button because it's going to reset this tool, which I'm going to get to in a second, how nuts that is. But I'm just doing it again here. Like dragging up and down doesn't do anything. Dragging left and right, you know, does the extrusion. If I have to hold shift, I have to magically know how to hold shift to get the offset. By the way, this is the most used tool in modeling. So this is not, and it's not a great start here. And I'm not just like trying to rip on Cinema4D, but like this just shows me there's not a lot of feedback on this. And so what I'm ultimately having to do is I'm having to jump over here to the attribute manager and just sort of dial in stuff like segments and things that aren't available through dragging. I'm gonna have to dial them in over here. So I'm looking down here at the attribute manager instead of here at my model. That's not a good thing. You don't want that. And I will say I love being able to drag these fields. Fantastic. I've been asking that in Modo for years. They have these stupid mini sliders that I'll show you that are not nearly as good as these. But yeah, so you know, when we're entering data, let's still look at Modo now. When we're entering data, I'll just isolate let's do the face here. There's a few ways to do it. So if I want to like, you know, extrude this circle here, Press B for the bevel tool. By the way, B should be the shortcut for the bevel tool. It's bridge in Cinema4D. Bridge is a useful tool, but it's nowhere near as useful as bevel. Bevel in Cinema4D is like MS or something. You know, it's like, come on, man. B for bevel. Anyway, I digress. Press B, and I immediately get tool handles. I can go out and I can go in, right? So nice. So if I'm a new user, super intuitive. I can also just drag left and right, and that's the inset. And I can drag up and down, and that's the shift or the extrusion. And you'll see these little icons over here, like that's a left mouse button, left, right, left mouse button, up, down. So I know what this tool does at a glance. Also, I've got a right mouse button here for segments. And so in all Modo tools, right mouse is always on segments or sections or the number of, right? Number of clones, number of segments, number of cuts, number of whatever. As consistent as we can make it. And this is something that I worked with Foundry on personally and individually to like actually set all these in the default Modo. Like all of these default settings are things that I set and sent to Foundry. So I'm probably a little biased for them, but it makes it much easier, right? So if I'm doing segments, I don't need to come over here and start twiddling around with them. I can just do it right here in my viewport, right? And if I want to dial in a specific number, you'll see this little window down here with a number and a title. If I'm going left, right, it says inset and it has millimeters, or up, down, it says shift, it has millimeters, or right button, it says segments. That's just the number of, that's just what I'm doing right now. And I can always press tab and just enter, like dial in like a very specific number, like 3, and I got it. And here, if I'm doing inset, if I want it like at 25 or something like that, I just tab 0.025, boom. You know, if I want to do extrusion at 0.1, tab 0.1, got it. And so I get precision, so I can iterate numbers, iterate these channels really quickly with drags and get precision input via a tab and enter the number really fast. And I also have tool handles. I have tool handles if I want to use tool handles, if I forget the drags or I don't want to glance over here. I can do that, right? And it's great because I can also, let me just convert that to edges. I can also, activate bevel here. And again, left, right, is I'm just getting the distance. I can right mouse and get the segments, and I can middle mouse and get, the sort of depth like this. So I can do all of this just dragging and looking at this in the viewport, getting the shape I want. And I can always go down here and dial in as many segments as I want, or dial in the the depth that I want. And I can also change these very easily. So like depth, I have left, right, middle. If I want it to be up, down, middle, I just slash with my middle mouse button up, down, and now it's up, down, middle, and I can save that, right? So I'll just turn that back, and there's sort of a default setting you could always like revert back to, where you can load new settings or save a new default setting. So it's very customizable. And if we could get something like this integrated in Cinema4D, I would also recommend having the mouse wheel as an input. I wouldn't have that as a standard input because obviously styluses don't have them. But you can have an alternative input where you just use mouse wheel instead of middle mouse button for a lot of these things, like or maybe for right mouse button, like or segments. And with Cinema4D, it does this with some tools. For instance, if I go to sculpting here, so let me grab the sculpt tool. Actually, let me get this brush. So middle mouse up, down, strength, middle mouse left, right, size. That's super intuitive. That's exactly what you want, because you don't want to come over here and do this for size and strength. You just want to stay in the zone here and do it over here. Here's the thing. Maxon, you can do that with all of your modeling tools. You don't just have to have this nice convenience on the sculpt tools. It should be on like all your tools, right? So let's go back to bevel here. Let's just go back to the standard layout and like select these guys again and activate the bevel tool. So I don't have any tool handles, and the only drag I'm aware of is this one. Also, like this just seems backwards to me. This is constrained to a 45-degree angle. To me, it should only do this if you hold the shift key. The shift key is this constraint key in Cinema4D. So if I want to constrain this to 45 degrees, fine, hold the shift key to constrain it. But most bevels are not going to be 45 degrees. You're going to want it, you're going to want some variability there. Maybe this is just for people who only ever bevel text in motion graphics or something. But if you want to have a good modeling program, most of the operation with this tool isn't going to be 45 degrees. And so you don't want to be holding shift. You want to be able to go left, right for extrusion and up, down for offset, right? And then you want another, right click or some other drag for the subdivisions. So these tools are, you're just, again, look at this freaking thing get in my way when I'm trying to select. Okay. So, again, like no tool handles and dragging just does one thing. So almost all my work is down here in the Attribute Manager instead of like right here. That's the main sort of thing I'm trying to show you. And if I want to get into something, if I want to dial in an exact measurement, I have to go over here anyway, right? So yeah, not super great. And so Modo's way of essentially letting you use tool handles if you want, all the tools have tool handles, or I can also, drag, any sort of, parameters I want to, or change that at any time, is a super powerful way. And then if I want to dial in an exact, like 0.08 or something like that, I just hit tab and dial it in. Super fast, super great. Okay, so let's look at this auto restart on mouse up issue, because this thing just drives me nuts, and it's really limiting. I'll show you how it's limiting, and it's really easy to just fix it too. So that's a good thing. We could fix this in Cinema4D, I think, without breaking anything. So just again, looking at Cinema4D here, let me isolate his face and go to poly mode, and I'm just going to select a couple polygons. Got my bevel tool active already. And I'll show you what I'm talking about. So I'm looking at this straight on. I want to do a little extrusion inset bevel here, right? So I start dragging out, maybe hold shift and see what I want. Thing is, because I'm at this angle, I can't tell how far out they're going. I need to navigate. So I need to mouse up and then hold Alt and navigate to see how far they went out. Well, that's not what I wanted, right? It's not far enough. So I want to continue dragging. But if I continue dragging in Cinema4D, it bakes in what I just did and restarts the tool, whether I like it or not. And if I'm like, oh, it restarted, and I undo, and I'm thinking, okay, I'm back to where I was, and I want to start dragging again, I can't do that, right? It just restarts it again. So I have to undo twice. There's no tool handles for me to tweak. It's just dragging. So if I mouse up, I'm screwed. If I mouse up, and change the angle, I have to start using the Attribute Manager to get what I want. And again, that's just taking me out of the flow, and it's just wrecking my experience as a modeler. So I need to be able to navigate after doing a drag operation to see if it worked from all the different angles, and then continue to drag, right? So if I'm in Modo here, I'm gonna go to Modo, and I do the same thing, right? I hit B for bevel, and I push in and drag out a little bit. If I want to look at it from the side, great. I can still continue to drag. Look at it from the top, I can continue to drag, right? I can continue to adjust these parameters without, resetting the tool. Now, it's often really useful to reset the tool. And you can do that in Modo. All you do is you just press shift. So if I want to inset this a little bit, I just press shift and I inset a little bit. And I release the left mouse, press shift, and push in again if I want a little indentation there, right? So I just did the bevel tool 3 times in a row, but I reset it by pressing the shift key, right? Which just sort of makes sense intuitively. It's like adding a selection. You press shift. It's like redoing the tool. You press shift. Now in Cinema4D, maybe you use control for that, since shift is the constrain key, and in Modo, control is the constrain key, so you wouldn't use control in Modo. But I think you can use shift in, control in Cinema4D, since that's the duplicate key, and it sort of makes sense where you're just sort of duplicating the operation. And I think that would really, really help with the auto restart on mouse up, which is, again, it's very limiting because it keeps you from navigating around. And then you lose your drag and you lose your focus on the center of the screen. So just if you want to reset the tool, just tap control. But it allows you to navigate in the middle of an operation and maintain the drag input of the operation you're doing without having to go to the Attribute Manager. Okay. All right, let's talk a little bit about the constant use of the Attribute Manager, always having to go down to the corner to adjust properties. and also the attribute manager losing focus. So I addressed this earlier, like the more on-screen controls you have with multiple draggable mouse buttons in multiple directions, plus tab to numeric enter, plus mini properties, which I'll talk again in 1 second, keep you focused on the center and not having to go to the attribute manager. So those are all things you can do. The losing focus issue is if I go to Cinema4D here and just grab this chest plate and go into poly mode and grab this polygon here. If I want to inset it, I can inset it here, and I've got some attributes over here, which is great. I can drag on these or whatever. But if I say I want to see where this is located, just because I'm for whatever reason, now I've lost my tool attributes because there's only one attribute manager in all of Cinema4D. It's right here. It just kind of it does everything, right? And in Modo, they divide it up where tools, if I grab these guys and go bevel, tool attributes are on the left and item attributes on the right. So I can always see them both at the same time. But of course, that means this left side is a lot fatter, right? So if I go back to Cinema, I think it may annoy people to move these icons over here to fatten this up just to have the attribute the tool, basically you can go over here and lock this to modeling and duplicate it over here. That is probably going to be annoying to people because it's going to change the interface a lot. And I can get these back if I click on this. Right now I got them back. But that's just a lot of clicking around and sort of annoyances. And I've definitely noticed it multiple times as a new user, where's my settings? The tool's still active. Where's my settings? Now, it seems like you should be able to have like a layer. We have a layers tab. It seems like we have plenty of room here for other tabs. Just have a tool setting tab so you can just tab back and forth between tool attributes and item attributes. That seems maybe the best way to do it. And I do think a mini properties sort of feature is very useful. So you can do a HUD in Cinema4D. If I right click on these you would control click these, whatever you want in there. And then let's just turn that one off and then right click and say add to HUD. And then if you hold control and drag it around, you'd never know that if somebody didn't tell you. You can get a HUD, but this isn't something you're going to do. Why? You're just not going to make a HUD with a modeling tool typically while you're working. Really, what we want is all the best sort of HUDs put together. Also, by the way, if I control click that and say add to HUD, it makes a whole new HUD. And so I've got to remove this HUD, and I don't see the little checkbox here, so it doesn't seem to really. Well, it works if you click on it, so maybe it does work. I don't know. That checkbox that's fine, whatever. But I think having preset HUDs for every single tool that you can just pop up with the same key is the way to do it. That's just how Modo works. So if I, go here, I want to do a loop slice, I fire the hotkey. But if I want to change this to symmetrical, I could go down here in the corner, but that's annoying. So I just press space. And then I go symmetry, and then I can press space again to get rid of it, and there we go. If I want it again, I pop it back up. I can always pin it by just popping on and off with a space bar, right? And it works with everything. It works with items too. So I go to an item here, I pop up mini props. There's some mini props of the items. So I can go over here and look at, the UVs or the morphs or the weight maps or whatever, rename it really quickly. I can do a mini prop with the camera. So I want to turn the cameras on, and I can pop up mini props for the camera or the light or whatever, or even materials and things like that. Actually, I never got to that. You should be able to do materials. So it's a really useful thing. I don't know what the keyboard shortcut you would use in Cinema4D, but being able to pop up a mini property of basically by mini, I mean just the most common attributes, because you don't want some giant list that sort of defeats the purpose, but assign that to a key that's easy to reach, and you don't have to, you kind of fix a little bit of the focus problem, because you could always get to the properties with the key, and also you keep your eyes centered on the center of the screen in your flow state without having to go to the attribute manager. So I think something along those lines would really help the whole issue of always having to look at the attribute manager and the attribute manager losing focus. Having a tab for modeling tools, having many properties you could pop up, having draggable all three mouse buttons on all three directions, or two directions for dragging attributes, tab for entering those attributes. You're basically just keeping on the center. I think that fixes those issues. I think Maxon's aware of that. I think they're trying to find a solution for that. Okay, so let's get into the meat and potatoes of modeling. Okay, drawing primitives into existing meshes and some missing tools, as well as some entire systems that are missing, like fields for modeling, or Falloffs, we call them in Modo, the workflow for action centers, stuff like that. So let me actually just show you some basic modeling in Modo, and then I'm going to show you how that's all kind of missing in Cinema4D. Then we'll get to some of these last few things over here, if that's okay. I think that's okay. So let's do that. Let's take a look at, let's start with Cinema4D, then we'll go over to Modo. Okay, so let's go over to Cinema4D here. Okay, so, I've got a couple of different meshes here. So let's say I want to add something. I guess I don't need to, but let's say I want to add something to the collar here. Maybe I want some pipes coming out of it. So in Cinema4D, how you typically work is that when you add new geometry, you're going to add just a primitive in its procedural form. And then you're going to sort of use tool handles and the attribute manager to sort of mush this cylinder into shape and position. And say I want a pipe coming out of the top of this. I'm just kind of dinking around here until I have it sort of the way I want it. I'm not sure if I have to make this editable. I will. And then I, shift click it with a face. And then I do like a sort of, can I do a control click there? And then I do sort of a right click and I do like connect objects and delete. And now, unfortunately, I probably selected in the wrong order. So now my cylinder is the name of it. I have to name this back to face and put it in the hierarchy. But you get the idea. Like now, this is all just, whoops, the face, I'm sorry. This is all just one object now, right? So it's a multi-step process getting new geometry into an existing mesh. You've got to create a primitive. You mush it into place. You then connect them or connect and delete. And if you mess that up in the wrong order, you've got to rename and reorganize the hierarchy. And then you can start modeling. So it's a lot, right? And what it comes down to is you can't draw primitives or new geometry, right? You can draw a spline, but you can't draw a cylinder. And because you can't draw a cylinder, it sort of eliminates using things like the Workplane as a tool to get these things where you want them. Or at least maybe it doesn't eliminate it, it sort of limits it. So let's look at Modo and how Modo works, right? Okay, here we are in Modo. Let me just grab the same geometry. I'm going to hit Shift-H to hide unselected because that's nice to have a keyboard shortcut to do that. And on this guy, I'm going to delete some, delete some of these guys like this. And I think I'm going to grab these guys and then I'll make I guess I'll just align them radially like this and smush it in a little bit. And that is what, 16 sides, what luck. So I'm just going to put a 16-sided cylinder right here into this mesh. So first I'm going to do is I'm going to hit Shift Home. I'm going to put the Workplane there. You see that blue grid? That's Modo's Workplane. Cinema4D has some really nice Workplane features, but they're not integrated into the workflow very well, which I'll get to in a second. So here's my Workplane. And with my Workplane there, that means the cylinder I'm going to draw into this mesh is going to start at the Workplane. So I can just start dragging out a cylinder. I want it on the mini props, y-axis, right? And I've got tool handles here for radius and height like this, but I can also just drag left, right for radius and up, down for height. Makes sense. If I want to change the number of segments, I can go left and right. I know I want 16, so I'll just press tab and type 16, right? I can dial in my precision just like that. And that's kind of like, where I want this guy. I can use tool handles if I feel more comfortable than using a drag. Either one will work. And by the way, I can continue to navigate and drag, no problem. Doesn't reset the tool and start making a new cylinder. It just gives me what I want there. If I want some up and down segments, I can just right click, drag up, down. Got that. Don't have to look over here at all. And yeah, it looks good. So I may actually just actually I could have created it without a bottom cap if I wanted to, but I'll just delete that really quickly. And then I can just bridge these together, right? I probably need to do a little bit of more work like aligning them. They're not really aligned, but you get the idea, right? I just sort of put those together like that. And I didn't have to connect objects or anything. I was able to use the Workplane to draw it in. And it's just a really nice modeling experience, right? I can draw primitives directly into my scene and not have to like create a separate primitive and sort of mush it into place and then connect them and then try to put it together. I don't lose focus when I drag if I mouse up and navigate. It's just a much nicer modeling experience. I can use my Workplane. And that's kind of what I'm getting to. And when you're doing a lot of modeling, it's super important to be able to model right into this, right? So I want to create some cables on this guy. Let's go back here. So sometimes you don't want to create a full procedural system. It's just fast to draw geometry into the mesh. And so if I want to draw cables in here, I could just pick my catenary tool, turn on snapping. So I'm going to snap to vertices. And all of my focus is just right here in the center. I just snap to this one, and then I have all these controls, like I said, these drag controls that are just, up, down for length or droopiness or whatever. That's fine. Drag left, right for thickness. I can drag left, right on a right mouse button to get more segments or sections if I drag up, down like that. And I can pop up mini props. Again, I don't have to go over to the side. I can just pop up my mini props. I want to change these to faces. And there we go. I could just shift click to add another one. So I'll just shift click and let's say we'll make one from here to here maybe. And then we've got two. And again, I can just drag up and down to change the droop. Maybe a little bit more on that one. And then just left, right to change the thickness. And then I'm done, right? So I've got this cool, some cables here now. And Cinema4D, I would have had to, make separate spline objects, make a profile, do a sweep, I guess duplicate the whole setup, change everything in the attribute manager with, sections and everything I want, duplicate it, freeze them, connect them. It's just a bunch of stuff. If you're doing direct modeling, you have to be able to draw on your primitives, not just splines or shapes. You have to draw on your primitives, and you have to be able to draw them into the current mesh. And this is something that is probably a larger feature request. It's not going to break the rest of Cinema4D. So just so you know, in Modo, I'm going to do a new scene here. We just Control N for a new scene and go back to Modo. This is a new scene. Like I always have multiple options for creating these meshes. Now, if you watch this icon right here, if I hold shift, there's a little plus, and it'll create a new mesh, just like it would in Cinema4D. But if I want to create a unit, we call a unit primitive, so like a 1 meter primitive, and add it to this mesh, instead of shift, I hold control, and it's going to add it to the mesh, right? And if I want to draw it onto the mesh, I just select the mesh I want to draw it on and start drawing, and there it'll be right there where I want it, right? So, and again, I can also make a procedural one if I want to. So you have all the options. It's not like if you're drawing into a mesh in Cinema4D that, all of these tools will only work by drawing into a mesh. You just need an alternate click. Okay, so missing direct modeling tools like bend, taper, shear, squash, that kind of thing. They're implemented as deformers in Cinema4D, again, because it's primarily an animation program, and they're great to have procedural deformers that you can always, once you set up, you can edit them procedurally and change them throughout the course of animation. Super useful. Not super useful for modeling, right? A lot of these tools we really need as modeling tools as well, just a direct modeling equivalent. So here in Modo, if I want to do some quick bends, it's just a direct modeling tool. So I can it's on a keyboard shortcut, and I could just really quickly, set my influence just by dragging a handle and do a quick bend, right? Let's say I want to do another bend, I'll just quickly do a couple we'll just make another sort of joint here. We'll just maybe add some more loops in here. And then again, I'm just going to grab these polygons. So I've got my bend tool, I'm just going to adjust my handle, and then I'm just going to, do a little bend. There we go. It took like 2 seconds, right? Just to do that. I even added some more loops in there just to get another bend. It was really fast. And in Cinema4D, you'd have to add a bend tool deformer, move it into position, and then, do your bend and make another bend tool deformer and then move that into position and do your bend. And then you'd have to freeze, the whole mesh to get rid of the bend tools because you don't want them around. You just want to do some quick bends. And so this kind of stuff is, you really need to add sort of direct modeling equivalents to some of these deformation tools, right? So you don't have to use procedural deformation if you don't want to. Let's look at this other page here. Action Center and Axis Workflow. Okay, this is actually a fairly easy one. And I was actually kind of shocked to see that these existed in Cinema4D. So Action Centers and Action Axes are essentially, you're just telling the tool, like, where you want the tool handle to be and how you want the tool handle to be aligned, right? So here I've got the center in the center of the polygons. That's nice. That's often where you want it. And here it's just aligned to the world axis. And I can get to this a couple of ways in Cinema4D. I can change the, again, I've got to get the attribute manager focus, boom. I can change the orientation to normal over here. And you see now it's on normal. That's an action center, action axis, right? It's in the middle of it. And it's set to, so you have position and orientation, right? That's what we're talking about in terms of action centers in Modo, right? I can go to world, it's down here in world now, but it's still oriented towards the normal. I could also get to this by right-clicking on these guys and doing selected, like that, and also go back to, right-click on this guy, and for orientation, just go back to axis like that. So Cinema4D has these tools, which is fantastic because I didn't think it had them. I really didn't think it had all these action center tools. But you saw me having to right-click on tool handles, like hunt down the tool handle, right-click, and then select something from a menu to get to it. Or, I've already lost focus on the attribute manager. I have to regain focus to the attribute manager and then go to a menu on the attribute manager to do it. Let's look at how Modo works, right? So let's go back over to Modo. This guy, again, Shift A, we'll just one key, we'll put it all right there in the view. So let's just do the same thing. Let's get these guys and press W. And there it is, just like, the standard action center is called automatic in Modo, which means I can right click and I can put it wherever I want it, right? Or I can just left click and put it wherever I want it. But it starts off in the middle there. But if I want to change the action center to normal or selected, which is sort of the average of the selected normals, I just Alt S. And there it is. It's a keyboard shortcut. It's a keyboard shortcut, and I can't tell you how important it is that it's a keyboard shortcut. Now, I can also do it through customized pie menus, right? So let me go back to Modo, and I have a custom pie menu where I can quickly go to, selection, and go automatic selection, automatic selection. But a good modeler is going to have the half dozen or even just 3 or 4 action centers that you use all the time committed to memory in terms of the keyboard shortcut. And in Modo, they're all on the left side of the keyboard. They're all with the Alt key. And it's just like Alt-A automatic, Alt-S selected or normal, Alt-E element, Alt-W world, or Alt-Z I think is element, Alt-W is world. So if I want to do element, right, Alt-Z goes to element action center. You can see it up here, element. I can also get them from here if I want to at the top. And I can pick an element that I want to use and it will align to that element, right? So if I want to align to this edge here, I just click there. Now I can slide these up and down, align to that edge or this edge right here, right? Like this. This is maybe a better case of this, right? So that's just Alt-E. I can go Alt-A, Alt-S. I can always change my action center really quickly with just hotkeys, right? And they're all kind of clustered in the same area. Where now if I go to Cinema4D, I've got to do this whole menu thing. It also has this whole thing where you can click this button and then click an element to align it to, and then this isn't going to work. You've got to go back and click this button again, and now it works. And so again, the features here, it has the feature. That's cool. You can go to the feature. It has it here. I can also go back to selected and normal like that. But it's just it's a lot of clicking, right? And so this action center, like an element action center, is a different workflow. It's not right clicking on the tool handle or going to the attribute manager. You have to go up to this icon and then you click it and then you do it and then you click it again and then you can do it, right? Then you can move it or do whatever. So you just need to streamline these action centers. You need to cluster them together. And the most common ones, you need to have configurable pie menus like we've talked about before. And that'll be in the customization section later on in this video. And but yeah, it's like the good thing is you got all this stuff. Like I was kind of shocked to see it in Cinema4D. It's like, oh man, it has action centers. Oh man, I have to like right click on the tool handle. What if there's no tool handle? Half these things don't even have tool handles, right? So it's a little annoying. And Modo has some a lot of action centers that Cinema4D doesn't. You can do something like a local action center in Modo. If I click like these various polygons here, I can go to like local action center, which I think I have right here. If I do rotation, it's going to rotate all of these guys individually like that. It's pretty sweet, right? But you can emulate these in Cinema4D. And again, I'm just kind of getting back to like Modo's a dead program. All of this stuff here that's really good, can be integrated into Cinema4D, and it could make Cinema4D a legit modeling program, a great modeling program for games, for movies. And you can do this without stomping on its animation capabilities, because these like shortcut keys like these Alt-C, I'm not the shortcut manager in Cinema4D, again, I'll get to this, can use some help, because it's hard to tell exactly what exists right now. And I can't find any sort of guide online that's updated and consistent. But most of these shortcuts I think are available. And if not, you can certainly get away with just a pie menu for your action centers if you want to. So that's all good news, right? And so action centers are incredibly important for modeling. And they're super powerful when you combine them with falloffs. And so a falloff in Modo is a field in Cinema4D. Fields in Cinema4D are the best part of the entire program, in my opinion. I love Cinema4D fields. They are primo, best in the industry. And unfortunately, they're not available for direct modeling, where they could be super useful. You use them for dynamics and some procedural. They can't really use them for procedural modeling because they're not available in the scene nodes either. But you can use them for dynamics and motion graphics and effectors and deformers and stuff like that. They're super useful for modeling. So again, if I go over here to Modo, if I've got some polygons here and I have a move tool, or let's just do like a bevel tool, right? And I want to make sure my mini props, their group is on, and I want to pop on a fall off or like a field. And this is just like you can see this little purple thing here. It's maybe hard to see. It's like a linear field in Cinema4D, but it's for modeling. And so when I do my offset here, right, and it's live, so I can adjust this, I can adjust my bevels fall off with a field. And of course I can go in, I can change this, like the easing on, I can reverse it or change the easing or make it symmetric. Let's change the easing here, like there's a ease in or ease out, or smooth, right, sort of a hilly. So this sort of shape is harder to get in Cinema4D, but here it's just a fall off. And again, because it's live, I can continue to adjust the fall off handles while I do this. And then I just get rid of it. It's gone. The fall off is gone. It doesn't exist in the scene. It's a temporary disposable field. And there's a bunch of them, right? And here, like there's radial and linear and cylinder and noise and curvature, vertex map, all the sort of things you'd have with fields. And you don't need all of Cinema4D fields available as fall-offs, modeling fields. Just, like 6 or 7 of them. And once you do that, because every single tool, if you can use both an action center and an action axis and a fall-off, those 5 tools become 50 tools. It's like a force multiplier for all of your tools, right? And it's really what separates Modo from other programs. And Modo has something called the tool pipe, where you can see it over here where it says pipeline, where if I've got a move tool and we'll just do like a cylinder fall off. You see these things in the tool pipe here, right? And I can add multiple fall offs. I can go over here to fall offs, and I can add like, like a radial fall off on top of that. You can see it has a cylinder fall off and a radial fall off, and I can come over here and I can add like the mix mode to like, multiply, add, subtract, whatever. Very similar to how Cinema4D fields work. It's in this tool pipe context. And so I don't know if you implement a tool pipe for the direct modeling tools where you can bring in fields and action centers. You can see like the action center is also in the field. If I'm in here and I do like Alt S for selection action center, and see the action center and the fall off is there. And I can also save this entire tool pipe as a preset, and it's super useful, right? So let's just talk about the Workplane really quickly. Cinema4D has really nice Workplane features, but it's just missing a couple of just quick workflow features. So if I'm in Cinema and I isolate this and I want to align the Workplane to a selection, I have to come up. There's no hotkey. I have to come up here, go to a menu, find the button, align Workplane to selection. There we go. It's kind of hard to see. It's there. I don't know that I can change the grid size for snapping, but you can do it, and then I can create a cylinder. It'd be nice to draw something, of course, like you would normally want to do, but I can create a cylinder there, I suppose, and then mush it into place as you do in Cinema4D, but it's there on the Workplane, right? And then to reset the Workplane, there's no hotkey. I have to come up here and I have to set it to Y, which by the way it's standard. And I don't really understand if there's a separate grid in Workplane. If I go over here to like filter, there's a Workplane and world grid, but if I turn off Workplane and that's still on, I don't really understand. Oh, it's world grid is off. So I don't know. This is me not knowing how Cinema4D works. In Modo, the Workplane and the grid are separate. There's the grid down there, obviously. And I can view them both at the same time, so I can just show the Workplane always, and there it is. The Workplane is always in the dynamic mode, and Cinema4D has this mode. So I look down, the Workplane snaps to the XZ. I'm in the front, it's snapped to XY, and this way it's snapped to YZ. Right, so and this controls a lot of constraints in Modo, so it's sort of an automatic Workplane, always on. But you don't need to see it, you just understand how it works. And so if you have it set to active, then the Workplane only shows up when it's aligned to a selection or something. So let's just do the same thing. If I get a selection here, and the thing is in Modo, it's assigned to a hotkey, Shift Home. It's a little more viewable, but it's blue, but it seems like it could still be more visible even in Modo. But then I can go in and, then I can, of course, draw my primitive out and just write where I want it, right? So, and then when I want to reset it, I just press End. And there's a bunch of other Workplane hotkeys just for adjusting the Workplane. And again, maybe I'm missing something. There's actually hotkeys built into Cinema4D, but I don't know that they are. And if you're a modeling program, you want a hotkey for the Workplane. Like in plasticity, it's space. It's like the biggest key in the keyboard because it's just a really common key for a Workplane operation. One thing, honestly, both programs could use is just like a Workplane item in the object manager or item list over here, where here I've got a Workplane and I've just made this out of a plane. But if you had a Workplane that you could select and then just right click to change the density of the grid, and you could change the color as well, that seems like a pretty useful thing. And then Modo has this thing called drop actions, where you can drag and drop parent or match or whatever. If you have a sort of place and align drop action, then if I were to place this just drag and drop this Workplane onto like this polygon, it's going to align to it, and then I can snap draw primitives from here, or draw out a spline, snap it to it, and I could always just right click and change the grid size or change the color. It seems like a useful thing, so maybe something to look like, maybe as a feature request, like a Workplane item in Cinema4D. It's never going to happen in Modo, obviously, but that's something I would have been pushing for in the next Modo, is just have a Workplane item in the list that you can just drag and drop on some component, and it snaps and aligns in position automatically, and you can use it as you can snap to it and change the color, make it more visible, that kind of thing. I think would be kind of nice. All right, let's talk a little bit about numeric field shortcuts. And by this, I mean two things. One is just being able to enter formulas in a field, being able to mix units, things like that. Cinema4D is actually really good about this. You can add and subtract and enter mathematical formulas with parentheses and everything and just do x plus or x minus or x times. You can also click select and for instance, if I want to do this guy here, I can go to coordinates. I can control select all of these and control click or control drag all these at once. Really great. Modo works the same way. It's a little bit different actually, where I can grab that, and if I'm doing scale, I can just you can't just grab them all, I guess, but you can just do control enter and it'll do all three. It has a concept of ganged fields where scale are sort of ganged, and if you control enter, it'll gang them all. So I can do 5 and control alt enter and just move it off 5 way over there on all the axes at once. And the only other thing you can really do in Modo is you can mix. Let me undo this a bunch of times. Is you can mix units. So I can say 1 meter is just defaulting to meters plus 2 feet, right? And say 6 inches, and I hit enter, and it figures it out, right? So that could be useful in Cinema4D. It's not vital, but if you've ever modeled your own house, it's useful, I can tell you that. But where Cinema4D gets weird is, and where Modo's normal, I think, is if I'm just doing a transform tool, again, tool properties over here, item properties over here, they work exact same way. I can do 5 times 3 here, or any sort of, I can do 1, control alt enter, it does them all. So all the shortcuts for proportional or addition or whatever, they're all these guys, they're all the same, like adding. They work whether it's in the transformation tools in component mode or in object mode, right? It's all the same. And in Cinema4D, you've got this thing called the object manager. And I'm guessing, the coordinate manager. And I'm guessing this is I don't know the history of the program, so I don't know when this was introduced. It seems like something that's been there a long time, maybe. It was really early on in the development, and it's now just sort of baked in. I think maybe, I'm guessing it's not super popular among Cinema4D users because it's just really weird. And so it's inconsistent. It works different than the fields in the attribute manager, which I'll show. And it's also, I don't know that it gives super useful information for most modeling activities. And I don't think going with heading, pitch, bank, rotation instead of just XYZ is doing you any favors. Again, this is probably really old. Lightwave 3D, one of the oldest programs, had heading, pitch, bank. Cinema4D came out shortly after that. Also had heading, pitch, bank. It's kind of easy to wrap your head around if you're not used to 3D, but it's a little bit weird. And so if I go to Cinema, and again, if I want to move, let's just make these points. And so what I'm getting here, I guess, is the average position of all 4 of these points, and the average as a sort of bounding box scale of all 4 of these points. And so I can do something useful like center on Z by hitting 0. Okay, that's useful. Although, in Modo, it's just, you just have these center XYZ all, or you can also do ZX, ZY, whatever. I think those are more intuitive and more useful. But okay, fine. But here it just gets I can't do if I'm in proper item properties or model properties here in the attribute manager, I can say I can have this at at 10, and I can say or 9 and say x minus 9, and it's going to go back to 0. The whole, if I go into polygon mode here, the whole x plus 3, it just doesn't work down here. And if I drag, nothing is happening until I click up here. And of course, over here, if I drag, it just works. The rotations get weird because y is green. That's going to be on the second one. So if I enter 40 here, it's going to move. But if I go to rotation, over here, y isn't green. Y is Well, it is, Y is green, but it's heading, which is the first one in the list over here. So it's inconsistent where green is normally the second in the list. Well, now green is the first in the list. So I try to enter something here. That's not rotating on heading. It's rotating on pitch, which is X. And so I've got to train myself that green is actually, when it comes to rotation, here, right? And the scale is just really weird. Like, I will say that, in Modo, it uses percentages. And percentages is just more intuitive for scale. So when you're making something, and I got to scale this Mex I up like 150%. It needs to be like half again as big, 150%. It just makes sense, right? And the coordinate manager over here is just like the bounding box dimensions. So if I go to scale, I can't type in 150%. I kind of got to do it in my head. And then, so I would do like times 1.5, and I can't select all of these at once and do it just once. I have to do it 3 times. Is that correct? I mean, if somebody tells me I'm wrong, then great, but times 1.5, right? Something like that. If I scale in the viewport, I do have a percentage reading in the viewport, which is, it's really tiny here, but it would be helpful if it was bigger. So I can see a percentage here, so that's helpful. And I can, if I start dragging and then hold shift, I can snap. So that's useful. But you know what's most useful? Just typing in 150%, control enter or whatever to like get it in all 3 fields, or being able to just, hit tab and get the numeric, input. So the coordinate manager, it's not intuitive. It's inconsistent. It doesn't work like the attribute manager fields. It's just kind of weird. It gives you the average center of the coordinates and average sort of the bounding back size. Heading pitch bank is out of order if you think about it sort of logically, with the green being at the top of heading and the green arrow being in the middle for Y, for scale or translation. So I don't know. Again, this is one of those things where it clearly just needs like attribute. I just need to be able to enter numeric, just normal numeric field numeric entry right here in the attribute manager. And I don't know why I can't do that. And I have to deal with this weirdness down here. It just you can keep this. It's fine to keep the coordinate manager, but it is weird that if I go to rotation, I can't just go, oh, I want it negative 25. Where do I type that in? Like, these aren't even changing. So does that work? Well, it does work. I can actually type in negative 25. I better do it in the first one because that's actually heading, not green, which is normally the second one. So I got to do negative 25 here, and it works. Nope, I'm sorry. See, I do the top one, negative 25 here, and it works. But I'm not getting any feedback. I get this tiny little number I can barely see on my screen, but there's no way to, at least I know of, to tab into that. I can, start dragging, then hold shift and get to it. So there's negative 25. That's one nice way of doing it. But again, it's just, it's weird. And it's like, I'm guessing it's hard to get transformation tool attributes in the attribute manager. Otherwise you would have done it a long time ago, because surely people don't prefer the coordinate manager. Like, this seems like, I feel like I'm making a major feature request here, but the coordinate manager is fine to keep it around for people who like it, but really attribute manager should be, and all the normal good attribute manager feel goodness that comes with it should be what we're dealing with transformation tools. I think, yeah, right? I think so. All right, copy paste workflow. Cinema4D has this. I think, again, just if you're going to be a modeling like a really good modeling program in addition to being a really good animation program, you just need a couple things, right? So in Cinema4D, here's my cube. I can move it over here. I can, select some polygons, and then I can Control-C copy them. Great. And then if I want an empty polygon mesh, I've got to make it over here. Nope, over here. It says like empty polygon, right? Okay. and then I can paste it. Now notice it's empty polygon is at 0, 0, 0. Cube is over here at -30. So if I paste an empty polygon, it's going to subtract that world coordinate from it. It's just going to, from this coordinate, and it's going to paste it locally, sort of locally, basically, is what I'm saying. That's a little bit different than Modo, and I'm not sure how you get it to paste on the, sort of just right where you cut it from in world coordinates. And Modo can do both. So that's one sort of missing feature. The other missing feature is you use empty polygons all the time. It's like using Photoshop with a new layer. Since you're using new layers, empty layers in Photoshop all the time, you want a hotkey for that, right? So in modeling, if you're constantly copying and pasting stuff to new empty polygons, you want a hotkey for a new empty polygon. You don't want to have to go over to the menu bar, then click the cube, and then find it in the list, and then click it, and then do your paste. So in Modo, if I select this guy, double click this bar, Control-C copy, and if I press N right underneath the chest or above it, I'm going to get a new mesh, and I can just Control-V paste into that mesh, right? And so it'll be right there. And the difference is it's going to do it locally. So again, let's go to the chest, and this time I'm going to move the chest over, kind of like I did, move that cube over in Cinema4D. And if I copy this, Control-C, and I go back to my new mesh where this was, if I paste it, it's going to paste it in wherever it was copied from in world coordinates. Now, you can you can do both in Modo. So, and that's really useful sometimes to be able to, in fact, most of the time it's really useful to be able to do that. And the way you do it in Modo, let me just do a new scene here, and let me just make a cube. And so this cube, I'm actually going to animate this. So I'm going to Shift W to set a key. By the way, using Shift and the transformation key, like Shift R for rotate, would set a key for rotation is actually a nice shortcut. And then I'm just going to go over. I'll go over here and set a rotation key as well. And then we'll go over here and just do some quick rotations. And we'll go over here and do some more rotations like that. And then I'm going to add we'll just do a cylinder in the middle here like this. So now they're both on screen, right? So you can see this guy animating around. So if I come over here, let's say I want to get these top polygons, copied into my cylinder here, but my mesh is way over here, right? And I've got these polygons here, and I want to paste them Cinema4D style into the local coordinates of this cylinder. What you can do in Modo is there's this little column here in the item list, and it'd be great to have this in the object manager, where it'll just make, if I click it, it's going to put the cube at the center of the world. It's going to kind of zero out all these coordinates. In a sense, making whatever coordinates it's currently at, rotation, translation, it's going to rotate the universe to snap to it. And you'll see if I actually scrub my timeline, you see like the cylinder animating around it. I think there's actually a Workplane mode that'll do this in Cinema4D. But what I do is I just copy in this mode, and then I put the cylinder at the center of the universe, and I paste it, and there they are, right there. And of course I can see them because I can see my selections through geometry in Modo. If that was Cinema4D, I would never know if it actually worked or not, unless it went to X-ray mode. So there we go. So this little button here is pretty awesome, and I would love to see that little button, reference coordinate system is what they call it, in Cinema4D, just to click it, and at any time it'll just like snap that object's local coordinates to make it the universe, center of the universe. And you can do, it helps like if you're animating and something's way off in the middle of wherever, rotate it around, and you need to make a modeling change. You just click that little button, it just snaps it all into the center of the universe. Although I think, again, there might be a Workplane version, that mode that does this in Cinema4D already. So, and then you can model it, then you click it in and it goes back off. So that's really useful. So what I want to do just really quickly is show Modo's, these sort of tools I'm talking about in Modo in action on just a real simple model. And I think I can make this whole model without ever having to go over to the tool properties or the equivalent of the attribute manager a single time, because everything I need is on screen. I'm not going to have to change, go to a menu and change selection modes or selection tools or change display modes to view through something. All that stuff's sort of built in. And so I'm just going to model this image just really quickly, the basic shape of this sort of futuristic greenhouse by Max Marharit. And hopefully, I found this in ArtStation. I thought it was cool. Hopefully he's okay with me using this as an example. But I'm just going to I'm really just gonna use the bevel tool just to make this, maybe one or two other tools really quickly. So I'm just gonna start by drawing a plane. Now Cinema4D, of course, you'd have to add a plane and then sort of change everything in the attribute manager and the on-screen handles to get it where you want it. Here, I'm just gonna, set my action center to world to make sure it's in the center and drag out what I want. If I want segments, I can right click, but I don't, so I don't want any. And that's it. Let's just press 1 to go to vertices. I don't have to go click an icon. Just, you don't have to, reach across my keyboard. I can just immediately select these guys. B, and I can change the rounding with right mouse button. I don't have to go over to the tool properties. I can just hit tab and dial in like 5 like that, right? Just staying focused in the center. 3 for polygons, grab that guy. B for bevel, go up and just push up, or I can use the tool handle if I want. And shift click, and I've reset the tool, and so I can go up one more. I have a sort of a built-in loop there now. Shift click, and I can go in. Shift click, I can go down. Shift click, I can go in. I'm just creating this sort of inset for the glass, and then shift click, I'm going to go up, and this is sort of the glass container of our whatever it is, greenhouse thing, something like that. And I'm going to shift click, and I'm going to create this, loop or lip again. So I'm going to go out just a little bit. Shift click, I'm going to go down a little bit. Shift click and go out a little bit. But I want to go up. So just using my pie menus, I'm going to look at the top view. I'm going to use wireframe, and I'm going to push in, and I want this to be the same distance as the bottom one. So just like that, it doesn't have to be perfect, but I'm just going to match it up there. I can get to this really quickly with pie menus. I don't have to use function keys or go into, hotkeys for, changing this into wireframe. I can lift my, mouse up and then continue to drag without having to go to the attribute manager. And it looks, that's where I want it. So I just go back to perspective and advanced mode, and there we are. Shift click and go up like this. And maybe I want some additional loops here, so I can just, right click and create them like that. And I'll create another little lip really quick. So just shift click and come out a little bit, right click to get rid of the loops, shift click to go up, shift click to go in, shift click to go down, and boom, pretty much done, right? Maybe it's a little too thin, so I'll just, stretch it out a little bit maybe. In fact, better way to do that would just be symmetry on Z. Middle click all the way through, you can see that I got it, and I'm just gonna move like this. Okay, a little bit fatter, looks good. Turn off symmetry. So let's just do some quick edge beveling. So again, I'm just going to come in here, and I'm just going to double click loops. Another thing you can do is just tag, touch some edges like this, and just touch them, right? You don't have to double click and everything. And then when you're done, you just press L, you fire the loop command, and it gets all of them. I don't have to go to a loop tool and double click them all and shift double click them all. I just tag them all with my sort of Uber selection tool. Go into bevel, and I'm just going to get a nice little edge here. Again, I'm going to navigate around because I want to make sure it looks good and I'm not overlapping anything. And then right drag to get some edges. Tab, we'll say 3 or 4. That's fine. There we go. Looks good. Didn't lose my drag by navigating. And yeah, let's do a couple more elements here. Maybe I just want to go to vert mode and grab sort of everything but these bottom ones here, like that, and just sort of move it up just a little bit. Looks good, something like that, I think. And maybe just double click this loop and slide it down a little. And maybe, yeah, we'll do that. Okay, so let's add a couple of these other little designy element parts here. So this gray part here, maybe this gray part here, maybe this part really quickly. Again, not once have I gone over to tool properties, I don't think. I did have to go up here to press symmetry because I made it too skinny to start, but you could easily put symmetry in a hotkey if you want to in Modo. Okay, yeah, what am I doing? Yeah, let's do a couple of slices. So I'm gonna grab these 3 edges here and just, Alt-C for loop slice. I'm just going to pop up my mini properties here. I want it in symmetric mode and just slice selected. And again, just space to get rid of my mini properties. These are the sort of mini properties I'm talking about where I don't have to go over here and check boxes and stuff. And I'll just sort of push these in a little bit like that. And then I may just do it one more time just to get a little hold edge in there, something like this. And then I'll move this down, and we'll get back to that in a moment. And let's go back up here. Same kind of thing. I'm just going to create some cuts to get the shape I want. So Alt-Shift-C and then holding Control is going to snap a loop there. And again, Alt-Shift-C and holding Control is going to snap a loop there. And then I'm just gonna L for loop to select these guys, and I'm going to middle mouse drag, and I can kind of see through here. I didn't quite get him, so I'm just going to just do it again. There we go. You can see I got it. I didn't have to go to the other side. If I overdid it, and I can just easily just get rid of those there. Again, I can see my selections from any angle. So it's just easier to know what I have selected, not have selected. And if I get something, like this, it's easy enough just to get rid of it without having to go to the back of the model. So again, I'm just going to press B. I want to make sure group polygons and mini props are selected, and just sort of push it out a little bit like that. Looks good. Yeah, I can. Let's just control click the boundary. It's actually Control-Alt-2 will convert that to boundary. Press B. I can do a little bevel there if I want. I can double click this guy, and I probably will go back here. I could have tried to select it through, but I'll just go click this guy. I can see them both. B. We'll just do a little rounding there. Looks good. Something like that. And then yeah, I guess we'll just L for loop and push this guy out as well. Control-Alt-2, get that boundary and just bevel that a little bit like that. This little guy, let me just really quickly use another cut tool. So I'll just press G, and this is my polygon cut. So there's G. I'm just gonna cut them in. I'm not even paying attention to like snapping them or anything, because I can use, I can right mouse click to not select through the model and just get these guys. I'm not going to get anything on the back end. I'm just going to right mouse, select these, and I'm going to use a pie menu to just put these where I want them. I'm just going to, again, left for left, boom, put them all in order, and I can grab these here. I can even, let's just grab like all the way along. I'm just paint selecting again, because I can paint select and marquee select with my same selection tool. So I can activate my bevel tool. And why don't I do like a linear fall off as well? So I'm just going to use my pie menu, got a linear fall off, and I'm pushing out with my bevel tool, and you'll see this sort of falling off. So I can grab this fall off and move it over, and see how I got that nice curve there with the linear fall off really easily. That's it. Go to 2, escape for get rid of my fall off. Let's grab these guys and just get a nice round bevel there, something like that, right? So pretty quick. I never once went over here. I never once went into a menu. I never once had to click up here or click around. I guess I pressed symmetry once. That's all I did. Adding materials as well. Sometimes it's nice just to, let's say I click this top one and then just shift up arrow to grow this selection like this. I'm just growing over those bevels here, right? So I'm just kind of growing this selection for this lip. Oh, I shouldn't have actually beveled these, but that's okay. So I'm just gonna grab these like this, and in Cinema4D you need to to assign a material. You need to pop open the material editor, create a new material, change the color, drag the material on it, and now that's a fine workflow. I don't want to get rid of that workflow, but sometimes it's nice just to be able to press a hotkey and then just type in the name of your material, whatever you want to call it, and just quickly change the color, hit OK, and there it is. And if I want to apply that again, let's say I want to apply it to these guys, I'm just going to middle mouse sort of marquee select these guys here and marquee deselect those. I press M, I've got a searchable list, I just pick gray, hit OK. It's actually a little bit faster. Missed one, press M, hit OK. I don't have to drag and drop materials if I don't want to. I can L for loop select these guys. Can I loop select this? Yeah, then again, I'm just going to grow up and then grow back down if I need to. I'm just going to grow up like that. Press M, got my gray. And I didn't have to. Again, I'm just kind of staying in the zone here. These guys as well. I'm just going to sort of marquee select here. I can actually just go to the front view like this and grab these and get rid of this guy. I think I can get rid of all of those and get those guys. There we go. And then just one more time, M, okay, like that. And yeah, pretty quick, right? And so, hopefully that wasn't useless to show. So in Cinema4D, I think, you'd be using, the combination of the inset tool and the extrude tool, because the bevel tool, which can do both of those things, but it's locked there's no tool handles and it's locked to this 45-degree angle. The only way to like get zero, like, offsets without an angle is to like go to the attribute editor. So the bevel tool is like useless for this in Cinema 4D. You have to use inset and either the arrow, the move with control held to extrude, which you can't do segments on, or the extrude tool. And you're going to be doing a lot of clicking around for selection, component selection, and double tapping keys to get wireframe on and off, and multiple selection tools, and double tapping keys to get like wireframe mode, or function keys to change your view quickly. So it's just hopefully that shows you they can stay focused in the middle if you have pie menus and you have proper keyboard shortcuts, which we'll talk about in a second, and you have this drag workflow with a tab and mini properties without having to go over to the attribute manager all the time. All right, so let's look at keyboard shortcuts, hotkey suggestions, and then I think we're done. I think we're done with this section. Okay, real quick, hotkeys. This is like nobody likes their hotkeys to change, so this is going to be, people are going to hate this. But if you want to be good at modeling, then there's going to have to be some hotkey changes, and you want to minimize as much as you can any sort of change to any other part of the program. I think you can do that. In fact, really just besides the 1, 2, 3 keys, I think these can be done pretty easily. Like I said, nobody likes their hotkeys to change, and people are going to really dislike the idea of changing these 1, 2, 3, and even 4 to selection keys, verts, edges, polygons, and objects instead of navigation. But maybe you make it a preference, and maybe you also, if you offer Modo navigation, Alt left mouse rotate, Alt Shift left mouse pan, Alt Control left mouse zoom. That will alleviate some of the pain because it's still one button, right? It's just Alt-Nav with one button. And I think you should be able to do that. Secondly, it is problematic that this key, all your modeling operations are on this key. That's on the right-hand side of the keyboard. You just have to look at the keyboard to get to them. And also the selection ones here. And that's, again, right-hand side. And you have to look at the keyboard. And so since those keys are really only used for modeling and selecting for modeling, I think it's, the animators aren't going to miss them if you move them over to the left-hand side of the keyboard. And I have a suggestion for that in 1 second. It would also be best not to have this sort of double tap deal for most of the hotkeys. Most of the most common used hotkeys should just be one key. Now, there is a way I think you can improve the sort of double tap deal, and that's group hotkeys. Now, you have that with K, cut. And I think we can also potentially get rid of XYZ, and this one, and this one. And, the reason I'm saying that, and hopefully this isn't causing outcry, like typically like in Blender plasticity, you press X, and then you move, it constrains to X. In Cinema 4D, it disables X, and so you're moving planar, right? It disables X. Well, let's just do, disables X, and you're moving planar. Really? You gotta oh, of course I don't have the move key, it's the select key. So the actual move tool, you disable X and you move planar. This is that whole thing with the move tool. That's not really the move tool that bothers me. Like selection doesn't work, these keys don't work, other aspects of it don't work, but whatever. So why would we get rid of XYZ? One, I just don't think people use them that much. If you use Blender or plasticity, you use it a lot because it works differently. If I press X, it constrains the dragging to just X. But in Cinema, it turns off X and constrains it to the planar handle, which exists as handles, and they're pretty easy to grab. So pressing a key is not super useful. Also, holding Shift, like Cinema 4D's, directional is pretty good. It can even get like at an angle here, right? And so like I really don't need those keys. These, XYZ, that's 3 keys to turn these off. It's just not something you do very often. I think you can improve this directional shift dragging a little bit by maybe doing something like, I don't think any other program has tried this, but if you do something like this, so when you press shift, you get a sort of like a semi-transparent red, green, blue set of vectors. And so this white is your mouse pointer. And then I know which way to drag. If I hold shift and just drag sort of the same direction of this blue, it's going to constrain it to Z. If I hold shift and I get this little helper guide and just shift, drag up, down, it constrains it to Y, shift, left, right, along this sort of vector of red, it constrains it to X. I think that would be super helpful. Lastly, you could implement the workplane like Modo. Like, you don't have to, but the way Modo works is you see this little, this is the workplane here, you see this little filled in gray. I can also just turn my workplane on, I guess, make it always visible. You'll see how the workplane, depending on which way I'm facing, changes. You see it down here and also the blue. And so if I'm moving this, if I'm looking down, it automatically constrains it to, the workplane plane, right? Just XZ. If I'm looking at it this way, you see the workplane change. It just constrains it to XY this way. It constrains drag to YZ. Same with scale. So scale is just constrained to the, Y and Z for dragging here. So you can do it similar to Modo like that. I even think like sometimes like you should drag constrain the rotation tool handles as well, where, in Cinema, if I rotate, if I grab it and then press shift, I can constrain the increments, which is great. But it seems like I should be able to press shift and just drag left, right to drag on heading here, right? Or shift up, down to drag on bank. That seems like that should work as well. Any rate, you get rid of having to assign those 3 keys to XYZ. You don't need to assign 3 precious keys to these guys. You need to free those up, and you can take M and you can put it over here. I'd put it on X because it's a little more accessible than Z. And I'd take U and I'd put it on Z, and then Y I would give to something else. But that's another thing you can do to sort of shore up the keyboard shortcuts. Lastly, I do think you need action center keyboard shortcuts for the most common action centers, like selection. So you just do Alt, and then let me just hide this. Do action centers. You would do Alt. I'm sorry, that's the Windows key. You would do Alt, and like A for automatic, Alt Z for element, Alt S for selection, Alt D for selection center world axis, and there's a couple others, like I think local is maybe X. And anyway, they're all just right here, and so your action centers are not, right clicking on a tool handle or coming over to the attribute manager. You just flip between these really quickly with the Alt key and your transform tools. And I can't tell you how much that just how much that speeds up modeling. It's super important to be able to do that. And lastly, since we freed up the M key and we moved it over here, since we no longer need X with our improved constraining abilities, we can just do a sort of Modo M key. And that's just a material. So I can just, if I want to make this a glass material, I don't have, just really quickly when I'm modeling, I'm not doing like in-depth material properties right now. I just want to just put a material on it without having to pop open the material manager and drag something on it. I just press M or create a new material and just give it a name right off the bat, and give it a color, and now I've got glass, right? It's just another way of doing it. It would still show up over here. So if I were to grab this and press M, it would just give me, I'd just be able to name the material like metal and give it a color, maybe 1 or 2 parameters, and hit enter, and it shows up over here. And if I have a bunch of materials over here in the list, and then when I press M, and they have different names, when I press M, I can just pick from the list alphabetically and search in that list as well. It's just a really fast way to assign materials when you're modeling and you don't want to like go over to the material manager and drag something or create a new one or whatever. It's just another way of doing it. So there's that. So I know that keyboard shortcuts are like super, they're super controversial and people don't like them, but I don't think we're interfering with any of the animators here except with this 1, 2, 3 thing. And I think everybody's going to appreciate better constraint abilities and not having to deal, just not having, you can mouse click these if you want to, but again, they're just not that useful nowadays because we have planar handles And we can use the Workplane trick like in Modo if you want to implement that. And you can also do this, my idea for having just sort of some access colored vectors under the mouse pointer. If you press shift and are dragging, if you press shift on a tool handle, you get the increments, but if you press shift while you're dragging, whether it's rotate, scale, or move, it gives you like a little hint basically of which way to drag to get that axis. I think that would be really nice. Now, I didn't talk about specific sub-D modeling workflow, specific patch modeling workflow, or specific Boolean modeling workflow. It's beyond the scope of this video. And these are the types of things that would need to be hashed out with expert modelers. Now, I'm just talking about sort of basic generalized modeling workflow issues in Cinema4D and how to solve them using Modo as a model, as a program that's kind of already solved most of them, but not all of them. It's beyond the scope of this video, and it's beyond the scope of like just me like telling somebody how to do it. This is something that requires roping in modelers, sub-D modelers, patch modelers, and Boolean modelers, and finding a workflow, not just tools. The tools are all kind of there. You can do Boolean modeling and sub-D modeling in Cinema4D. It's really the workflow that we're looking for. So I'm just wrapping up the modeling section there with that, because I guess what I'm saying is we're just sort of, this is the bare minimum that needs to be done. All these 10-hour video here, whatever this is going to be, to make Cinema4D like a great modeling program before you get into these specific workflows. And these specific workflows do need a fair amount of attention to be good. Oh my God, second to last slide. I think I'm actually going to make it through this video. So customization. Just really quickly here, I want to make a couple of points. Like Cinema4D is actually quite customizable. You can change layouts, keyboard shortcuts, things like that, dock panels, that's great. But it's not super customizable. It's not customizable like Modo is customizable. And one of the problems is I can't get to all the commands I need to get to in Cinema4D. So for instance, if I'm in Cinema4D and I have this selected here, and I've got if I press 1 or 3 and select some polygons, and I want to convert that to vertices, I have to hold Control and go up here and click on that. Now it's converted to vertices. I want to find that command that converted that to vertices and map it to Alt-1. So 1 is go to vertex selection mode, and Alt-1 is convert whatever is selected to vertices, right? Because it's faster. It keeps me in the flow. I have no idea how to get to that. Similarly, it's also really nice to be able to do something like go over here to view settings, and you can have inactive object settings, right? I didn't even know you could do this, but this is super useful. You can have like the active object in solid, and I do this in Modo all the time, all Modo people do, and the inactive in Wireframe. Helps you focus, keeps the other items up there so you can, align things to them and everything else, but they don't get in the way. So if I go over here to viewport settings, I need to know what this little checkbox is. Like what command is being fired when I click this checkbox. I don't know how to get to that. And I don't know that you can in Cinema4D. Maybe you can. If I go to Modo, and I do something like, select some polygons or like this, I'm going to convert those. If I pull up this little thing here and go to history, I can do, Alt-1, which is going to convert that like that. And I'm going to see the command right here. It says select convert vertex, right? And I can take this and I can copy it and I can put it, on a keyboard shortcut or in a menu somewhere or in a pie menu or whatever. And I can also toggle things really easily. Like if I'm, turning off the grid, so I go to like viewport options and drawing invisibility, and I turn off the light visibility or turn on the lights. I click that and I see this thing here, which is, viewport, whatever it is, like set lights to true. I can actually go in here and change this true to a question mark, and that turns it into a toggle, and I can copy this and put it into a pie menu or whatever. So now I can just toggle my lights, right? That's all I'm doing with this command, just toggling, checks to see if it's on. If it is, it turns it off. Checks to see if it's off, and if it is, turns it on. Really easily. And so I can do things like that with the viewport as well. So I can do things like this, like I just showed in Cinema4D, where I can very quickly put this on a pie menu if I want to do, inactive objects to wireframe or not, right? And so I don't know how you get to that stuff in Cinema4D like you can in Modo. And in Modo, you can do things like launch multiple of those commands at once. You don't have to know scripting. You can create a macro. So there's just some customizable things. The main thing is being able to create pie menus. So Cinema4D has like a pie menu, a singular pie menu. And I would just call it a radial menu, actually, because it doesn't operate like a pie menu. It operates like a radial menu, right? It's got, I'm not using muscle memory here. It's just a menu in a different format. So it's basically, this kind of menu, but it's in the radial format, right? Which is fine. It's useful, and I use it. But custom pie menus are what you really do for quick toggles, things like, changing the camera, right? These are all what I'd call muscle memory pie menus, right? Wireframe, Verts, toggling on cameras and lights, grid, that kind of thing is all like, shading modes, right? It's muscle memory, and you need to be able to customize the program you spend 8 to 10 hours a day in to take all of these common things you do, especially with modeling, because modeling, you're doing a lot of the same things over and over, and put them on a pie menu muscle memory toggle so you stay within the flow. So that's the main thing I want to say about customization. So let's wrap this up. Last slide, everybody. Oh my God, I'm going to drink so much when I'm done with this. UVing and scene nodes for procedural modeling. So let's talk about scene nodes really quickly. I think they're super cool. Some major deficiencies right now. You can't really see selections, and the whole deal with procedural modeling is procedural selecting. Like if you can figure out procedural selecting, you can do procedural modeling. So it's missing quite a few procedural selection tools, and I've been working with Donovan a little bit from Maxon. He's super great. He's made a few procedural selection tools for me, like, select polygons by side and stuff like that, right? Things that are intuitive to a non-coder or scripter or technical artist. But you need that feedback loop of actually seeing your selection in the viewport. So here's the soccer ball I made with scene nodes. But the selection just kind of gets passed along here, and I can use like select edges by length. This is a capsule Donovan made for me where I can type in parameters for the length I made. And this is the type of tool you need for artists to use procedural modeling. But I need to be able to see the selection in the viewport. And I know they're having trouble with that, and hopefully they can figure that out. The other thing is I need to be able to use fields in my procedural modeling, because fields are the most powerful part of Cinema4D in my opinion, and it needs to be available to my nodes. And at least from my understanding is like fields aren't really available yet. Like I can't control like this chamfer with a field. And so in Modo, you can actually do those things. Like if I were to do like a new scene here, and I'll just show really quickly, I guess. If I'm going to do, let's do a schematic over here, and let's pop open my stack. And so in Modo, you can view procedural modeling as a stack or a schematic. So I can add a modeling stack here. And I can add a cube, let's say, to the deformer stack. And so there's my cube, right? And so I've got the same sort of like, I can use the tool handles, or I can use OmniHull and add some segments like this. And again, if I want to view the stack in the schematic, I can just drag this over here, and I can view my stack in the schematic and in the stack view over here. So in Cinema4D, Cinema4D really, I think of as a stack-based system in general. Like all the fields are stack-based, the deformers and the object manager are all stack, but then the texturing is all schematic. And Modo is really it has a unique stack system, but it's more like Substance Painter or Marmoset. I think that'd be great, by the way, in Cinema4D, a stack-based material system. But one thing at a time. So, I can go in here, and like my cube is going to have, a slot in the tool pipe. It's going to have selections. If I want to add something to the cube, like the next thing in the deformer stack, we'll add a polygon bevel, and you can see it popping over here in the schematic. And you can see it in the turn on the cube in the stack here. So here's my bevel. I can start beveling things out. Let's turn off group polys. And so it's the same tool handles, right? So there's my bevel. But what I can do in here is I can do a selection right here in the operation, whereas in Cinema 4D, the selections are separate nodes that feed into other nodes. So like my, chamfer, I have a chamfer node, and then I have a selection here for some polygons by edge length, and then I have a polygon bevel node right there. Where in Modo, it'll put this selection into the actual modeling node, right? So in Modo, I think this is a nice way of working. I don't know if it's better, but it's certainly a nice way of working. So I can do a selection here. I'll just do like a random select randomly, right? So we'll just select some random polygons. We'll select like 30% of these, and I can see it in the viewport here. So when I go to bevel, I can, I know what I'm beveling. So it's important to be able to see those selections, and I can also do a fall off here, like you would a field in Cinema 4D. It's called a fall off here. So I can add a radial fall off, and I've got visible selections, and I've got a radial fall off in here for my procedural modeling, and I can see this both in the schematic, a node-based view. So if I want to do some math nodes here, I can do that, or in a stack. So it's pretty nice in Modo, and it's pretty unique, and it's gonna die with Modo, unfortunately. But in Cinema 4D, to improve procedural modeling, we need to be able to view our selections, and I think we need to be able to have access to fall-offs. I don't know if you do that just in a linear node after node way, or if you can integrate selections and fields into the actual geometry modeling nodes. Like this bevel node would have a selection slot and a field slot. I don't know. But, there's a lot of promise with this, and I hope they continue to work on it. With UV, I'll make this real short. UV in Cinema 4D feels like using a completely different program. It's just all the skills you pick up with using the transform tools and stuff like that in Cinema 4D do not translate to UV editing. It's like a completely different program. There's so many things wrong with it. And I'm not trying to bash Cinema 4D here. It's just from a high level view. If I look at Cinema 4D and I say I want to UV map this, I'll go over to UV edit. This tool could be used in a 3D view, right? So, first of all, I've got all this camera stuff going on with these black lines and everything else, but let's just focus here on UV, right? So I'm used to using my transform tools, move, rotate, scale. But in the UV view, it wants you to use this tool to move, rotate, scale. So it just feels like a different program. The interface is sort of weird and different with the tools kind of spread around like this. It just feels like a completely different program. And if I'm going to use a completely different program to UV, why not just use, UV layout or, Rhizome or something like that, right? So at a high level overview, UV should just be like modeling in 2D. So all the tools they are already really good with in the 3D viewport, just use the same tools in the 2D viewport. And yes, you can use some UV specific tools. It has to have updated algorithms for unwrap and pack, of course. And the marquee is still move, rotate, scale marquee tool in Cinema 4D. This one, it's still a good tool, but I should be able to use my all of my transform tools, all of my deform tools as well. And Modo is just so good at this, right? So if I'm in Modo and I want to UV this guy, and so I'm just going to make turn this UV over here and get my modeling tools back and turn off this thing over here. So I'm just going to go to UV, just the UV tools here. So I just grab the UV texture here. So again, I'm seeing red because I have these are all overlapping UVs. So I have all my different options here for showing overlapping UVs. But basically, I can use all of my just general modeling tools, my move, rotate, scale tools in UV space. And not only move, rotate, scale, I can use pretty much any tool in Modo for not creating new geometry, but deforming geometry in UV space. If I want to bend these polygons, I can just do the bend tool, and I can bend polygons just like I would modeling in 3D space. If I want to, smooth polygons, I can smooth them. If I want to, use an action center, like take this and move this with an element action center on some diagonal edge here, I can do that, right? So I'm using action centers in UV space. If I want to use fall-offs in UV space, I can use fall-offs in UV space, make a linear fall-off and, automatic action center, put this wherever I want it and move it in UV space. I'm just modeling in UV space, right? So all of the skills I have with modeling in 3D space, I can use in 2D space. I can sculpt in 3D space, right? I can go to sculpting tools and I can go to the sculpt, smooth tool, turn off my fall off, and I can sculpt in 3D space. I can do the sculpt move tool or whatever, right? And all of the tools work, right? The tweak tool, right? I can move that around. I can set it to, rigid connections just to move like pieces around really quickly, right? So there needs to be like major work done in the UV tools in Cinema4D. This is not a surprise to anybody, and this is not going to ruin Cinema4D for anybody, right? So if you're a motion graphics person, you're going to welcome newer, better 3D tools, and you're probably going to appreciate, hey, I can just use my regular modeling tools in 2D space to get what I need and have like updated, unwrapping and packing algorithms, of course. And of course, you're going to have some UV specific tools for aligning and stuff like that. But in general, having generalized tools that can work in 2D and 3D is the way to go. And that's why Modo's tools are so nice. Like snapping in UV space works just like snapping in 3D space. Fall-offs, same thing. You can, whatever. It just all works. Action centers in UV space. So that's just sort of the general UV thing. Like if I'm going to just back through all these, like I covered a lot of stuff here. And I will put chapters on this. And, here we are. But this was the main point, right? I really do think that Cinema4D is like 85 or maybe 80% of the way there. I probably said 90% at the beginning of the video, and after doing this for a couple hours, okay, maybe 80%. But you're close. And look, they're, in commercial packages, Maya is the default modeling program. Why? Because it's super great at modeling? No, it stole enough from Modo to be good at modeling, but it can't do a lot of the things I just showed. And Cinema4D has all these tools, and Cinema4D certainly can become a great modeling program and find a place in game studios and visual effects houses by just sort of finishing what you started and doing some of these modifications. And hopefully this is just sort of not a roadmap, but a starting point to sort of reevaluate your modeling workflow and look at your modeling tools and see how you could make them more cohesive, get people in the zone, in the flow state, and get all these little clicky things out of the way. Let's get the Uber selection tool that has all the Modo tools in the Modo selection mode into Cinema4D as our main selection tool. That would be huge, right? Maybe we could do that as a plugin. Maybe Maxon can do that. Some of the Modo plugin authors are looking at creating drawable primitives and things like that. You can go into Cinema4D and draw these things and use hauling to change the parameters, like I showed in this video. And that'd be cool to get these in here as well. And I'll be giving updates on that later on. But mostly I just want some feedback here from Cinema4D people. I know you're going to point out a lot of things I missed. I'm sure I missed a ton because I'm in very much a Cinema4D noob in a lot of ways. But hopefully you agree with a lot of what I'm saying here. And a lot of the Modo people who are looking for a new home can come to this. And if you're stuck using, again, Blender and Maya are used mostly for modeling now, not because they're super great at modeling, it's because they're the best available modelers. And the best modeler is no longer on the market. And there's no reason all those modeling tools and modeling workflows should die with Modo. Integrate as much as you can in the Cinema4D without ruining what Cinema4D is good at. And there's only a handful of things that you would be coming into conflict with the animation and simulation and motion graphics abilities of Cinema4D by improving the modeling tools. And I think most of the modeling and UV improvements would be welcome additions, even if you are primarily a motion graphics artist. So I'm going to leave this here and come to the Pixel Fondue Discord. Let me bring that up really quickly. this is where a lot of the discussion is taking place. So if you don't go to the Pixel Fondue Discord much, I will make sure there's invites in the description here. The Pixel Fondue Discord looks like this. And so we've got all kinds of like, general 3D and everything's broken down. Like, of course, you got a lot of Modo and Modo content and Modo quick tips and Modo questions, things like that. But we have a Cinema4D series now where we've got Cinema4D general, Cinema4D plugin development questions for people who want to do plugin development for Cinema4D. It's nice to do this in a Discord format, discussion-oriented format sometimes, instead of having to go to like the Maxon forum and try to communicate people with a question-answer forum format. We've got Cinema4D training and content channels as well. So again, like a lot like the Noseman tutorials and everything is sort of consolidating here. I really want to get more Cinema4D artists into the Pixel Fondue Discord. There's a lot of plasticity people here. There's a lot of Octane and Houdini people here, some Unreal people. But Cinema4D is new here, and I'm turning this into my main program, so I'd love to get as many Cinema4D people here as possible. And as far as I can tell, there's just not like a Cinema4D home base anymore. Like it's not Reddit. That place kind of sucks. And it's not really Maxon forums anymore as far as I can tell. There's a beta forum, but for just regular Cinema4D users, I would love to get more of you guys here on the Pixel Fondue Discord just to talk about this kind of stuff. Okay, I'll leave it off here, and yeah, I'm gonna go drink now some beer. Bye.
Yum, yum.